Welcome back to Midnight What Ifs, where history meets horror and the darkness between facts becomes fertile ground for fear. I'm so glad you've chosen to spend these quiet hours with us. If you're new here, or if you've been walking these shadowed paths with us before, please consider subscribing to never miss a tale. Hit that like button if you enjoy what unfolds tonight. Share this with a fellow night owl who appreciates the darker side of what if, and leave a comment below with your own twisted scenarios. What historical event would you like us to reimagine? Your suggestions fuel these midnight journeys. Now settle into your pillows. Let the weight of the day drain from your shoulders. Close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest half-lidded as you drift. Tonight, we're traveling back to March 2011 to the coast of Japan, to a moment when the Earth itself betrayed everyone standing on it. This is a story about the Fukushima disaster, yes, but also about what might have been waiting beneath all that concrete and seawater, listening, patient, hungry. Let's begin. You are standing at the window of your second-floor office, looking out over the gray-blue waters of the Pacific. The date is March 11th, 2011. The time is early afternoon, 2:43 p.m. to be precise. You've been in Japan for 8 months now, working as a foreign engineer at a chemical processing facility about 30 miles from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The job pays well. The coastline is beautiful in a stark, industrial way. You've grown used to the morning taste of miso soup, the evening walks past fishing boats that smell of salt and diesel, the cheerful chime of the convenience store down the street. Today is cold. Spring in northern Japan comes slowly, reluctantly, and the air still carries the bite of winter. You're wearing a sweater under your work jacket. Your coffee, third cup of the day, sits steaming on your desk, its warmth a small comfort against the chill that seems to seep through the building's thin walls. Everything is ordinary, beautifully, perfectly ordinary. Your colleague, Tanaka-san, is humming at his desk across the room, a tune you don't recognize. Someone's phone rings in the hallway. You hear laughter, muffled by distance and closed doors. Outside, a seagull wheels past your window, white wings catching the pale afternoon light. The sky is overcast, a flat sheet of gray that presses down on the world like a lid. You turn back to your computer, reading through the same email you've been staring at for 10 minutes. Your mind wanders. You think about dinner. You think about calling home this weekend. You think about... And then the world begins to move. It starts small, a tremor barely noticeable like a heavy truck passing on a distant road. You felt earthquakes before in your months here, small ones, the kind that make the hanging lamp sway gently and then stop. Japan sits on the ring of fire. The earth is always restless beneath these islands. This is normal. This is. But it doesn't stop. The tremor grows. You grip the edge of your desk, more from instinct than fear, as the floor beneath you begins to undulate. Not shaking, not yet undulating like water, like you're standing on the surface of something liquid that's pretending to be solid. Your coffee cup slides toward the edge of the desk. You reach for it automatically, but your hand misses because the desk is no longer where it was a moment ago. The shaking intensifies. Somewhere an alarm begins to wail, high, urgent, electronic. Your computer monitor tips forward, you catch it. Behind you, Tanaka-san shouts something in Japanese, a word you don't know but understand completely. Run, hide, get down, your legs don't obey. You're frozen watching papers slide from desks like snow, watching the fluorescent lights overhead swing in wider and wider arcs, watching the window glass ripple in its frame, warping, bending, somehow not breaking. The sound is immense. Not just the rattle of objects falling, not just the groan of the building swaying on its foundations, but something deeper, a bass rumble that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, a sound you feel in your chest, in your teeth, in the hollow spaces of your skull. It's the sound of the earth itself screaming. You drop to your knees, not a choice. Your legs simply give out. The floor is bucking now, heaving, and you press your palms flat against it, feeling it surge and drop like you're on the deck of a ship in a storm. 60 seconds pass. 90. The earthquake should be ending. Earthquakes end. But this one keeps going, keeps building, and you think wildly, impossibly, that it sounds like breathing. Like something vast and ancient is inhaling, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling beneath you. The lights go out. Emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in sick yellow. Through the window, you see the buildings across the street swaying, actually swaying, tall concrete structures moving like reeds. In wind, something inside you understands this is not a normal earthquake. This is the big one, the 9-magnitude monster that seismologists have warned about for decades. The Tohoku earthquake, the one that will trigger a tsunami, the one that will flood Fukushima Daiichi, the one that will change everything. But there's something else, too. Something you can't quite name. The sky outside has changed color. Not the gray of clouds, but something else, something between purple and green, like a bruise spreading across the heavens. The shaking continues. 2 minutes now, maybe 3, far too long. And beneath the roar of destruction, beneath the crash of glass and the shriek of metal, you hear something else. A sound like singing? No, humming. A deep, resonant hum that shouldn't be possible, that shouldn't be audible over the chaos. But there it is, threading through everything like a melody you've forgotten but your body remembers. The earthquake begins to subside. Slowly, reluctantly, the earth settles back into itself. You're still on your knees, hands pressed to the floor, breathing hard. Your heart slams against your ribs. Around you, the office is devastated. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, papers everywhere, water dripping from a broken pipe in the ceiling. And then the sirens begin. Not the building's alarm, something else, something far away and coming closer. The tsunami warning, you know what it means. You have minutes, maybe, to reach high ground. But you don't move. Not yet. Because you're listening to that hum, that impossible sound that seems to be rising from the floor beneath you, and a question forms in your mind, cold and certain. What if the earthquake wasn't just natural? What if something heard the earth crack open? What if something down there, deep in the fault lines and the fractured bedrock, finally found a way to wake up? The sirens wail. The humming grows louder, and you realize that the shaking may have stopped, but whatever has begun is far from over. That humming hasn't stopped. Even as you force yourself to stand, even as Tanaka-san grabs your arm and pulls you toward the stairwell, even as the building's emergency system blares its automated warning in Japanese and broken English, tsunami alert. Evacuate to high ground immediately. That deep, resonant hum continues beneath everything else. You feel it more than hear it now, a vibration in your bones, in your jaw, like standing too close to enormous speakers playing a frequency just below human hearing. Outside, the world has transformed into chaos. People pour from buildings, stumbling over rubble and broken glass. Someone is crying. Someone else is shouting directions, pointing inland away from the coast. Cars have been abandoned in the middle of the street, doors flung open, engines still running. The earthquake lasted nearly 6 minutes, an eternity, and in its wake everyone understands what comes next. The ocean always answers. The ocean always collects its debt. You run with the crowd, feet pounding pavement, breath coming hard and sharp in your lungs. The cold air burns your throat. Your legs ache from the adrenaline, from the fear that sits heavy in your stomach like a stone. Around you, the sounds of evacuation blend into a single desperate symphony. Footsteps, shouts, crying children, the wail of sirens cutting through everything. You're moving inland, uphill, toward the designated evacuation point on the hillside overlooking the town. You've practiced this route during drills, walked it on sunny afternoons when disaster seemed theoretical, distant, impossible. Now your body follows the path automatically while your mind spins, trying to calculate time and distance, trying to remember what you've read about tsunamis. How long after an earthquake? How fast does the water move? How high will it reach? 40 minutes, you remember. The tsunami should arrive approximately 40 minutes after the earthquake. You check your watch, but the crystal is cracked and you're not sure if it's still working. Time has become elastic, unreliable. Has it been 10 minutes since the shaking stopped? 20. You taste salt in the air before you see it. Not the clean salt of ocean spray, but something thicker, heavier, like the air itself has been marinated in seawater. The taste coats your tongue, the back of your throat. It tastes wrong, ancient, like something preserved too long in the deep. The evacuation point is a wide clearing on the hillside, perhaps 60 meters above sea level. You arrive gasping, bent over with hands on knees, drawing in great gulps of that strange, salt-heavy air. Others are already here, hundreds of people, maybe thousands, still arriving in waves, climbing the steep path with desperate energy. Some carry children. Some carry bags stuffed with whatever they could grab. Most carry nothing at all except the wild look of those who have just felt the earth betray them. And then you turn to look back at the town, back toward the coast, and your breath catches. The ocean is wrong. It's pulling away from the shore, receding, drawing back like a massive inhalation. You've read about this. The water retreats before a tsunami, pulled out by the same force that will send it crashing back. But knowing about it and seeing it are different things entirely. The harbor is emptying. Boats that were floating minutes ago now rest on exposed seabed, tilted at impossible angles. The beach has doubled, tripled in size. Rocks and sand that haven't seen air in decades lie bare, and glistening under that strange, bruised sky. It's beautiful in a terrible way, hypnotic. "Don't look," someone says beside you. An elderly woman, her face creased with years and wisdom. "Don't watch it come, it's easier." But you can't look away. None of you can. You're all frozen there on the hillside, an audience to apocalypse, watching the horizon with the sick fascination of those see who know what's coming, but can't quite believe it will. Minutes pass. The sirens continue their mechanical keening. Someone has started praying. You hear the rhythm of it, even though you don't understand the words. A child asks their mother when they can go home. The mother doesn't answer. And then you see it. A line on the horizon, dark, solid, moving. It doesn't look like water at first. It looks like a wall, like the edge of something vast and dark sliding across the world. The sound reaches you before the true scale becomes apparent, a sound like freight trains, like jet engines, like the earth itself groaning under impossible weight. Survivors will later describe it as the sound of 1,000 waterfalls, but that's not quite right. It's deeper than that, more resonant. It sounds almost like the humming, like what you heard beneath the earthquake. But louder now, clearer, no longer hidden under the chaos of destruction, but rising with the water, carried on the wave, sung by something vast and patient that has finally been given permission to rise. The tsunami is moving faster than you thought possible. 40, 50, 60 kilometers per hour, racing across the shallow coastal waters, growing taller as it approaches shore. You watch it swallow the empty harbor in seconds. You watch it crash into the first buildings with the force of a solid thing, concrete meeting concrete, and those buildings don't sway or bend. They simply cease to exist. They're there, and then they're not, swallowed whole by churning white water and darkness. The wave is 40 meters high, maybe more. It blocks out the horizon, blocks out everything, a moving mountain of ocean that has forgotten it's supposed to be liquid and has become something else entirely, something with weight, with purpose, with intention. And there, in the churning depths, you see them. Shapes, dark shapes moving through the water but not with it, moving against the current, moving with deliberate purpose. They're enormous, you can tell even from this distance, even through the spray and foam. They move like eels, like serpents, like nothing that should exist in any ocean you've ever heard of. Long, sinuous, darker than the water around them, and they're not being carried by the tsunami. They're guiding it. Your mind rejects what you're seeing. Tricks of light, shadows cast by debris, hallucinations born from trauma and fear. But you keep watching and they keep moving, and somewhere deep in your brain, in the ancient part that remembers when humanity was prey, a single certainty crystallizes. The water didn't just rush inland because of an earthquake. The water came because something called it, something old. Something that's been waiting in the deep places, patient beyond human understanding, for the earth to crack open just enough. The tsunami crashes into the hillside below your position, and the sound is beyond description. People scream, people pray, people clutch each other and weep. But you're still watching the water. Still watching those shapes moving beneath the surface, circling, and you swear. Though you'll never be able to prove it, never be able to make anyone believe it, you swear that for just a moment one of them surfaces. Just for a moment. Just long enough for you to see something massive and dark and covered in things that might be scales or might be something else entirely. Something that catches the strange purple-green light from the sky and reflects it back like oil. Then it's gone, pulled back under, disappearing into the churning water. But you saw it, you know you saw it. And worse, much worse, you think it saw you too. You can't stop thinking about what you saw in the water. Hours have passed since the tsunami receded, pulling back out to sea with a sound like the world exhaling, leaving behind a landscape transformed into something from a nightmare. The coastal town where you worked this morning no longer exists. In its place, a field of debris, twisted metal, shattered homes reduced to kindling, cars stacked on top of each other like a child's abandoned toys. And bodies. You don't let yourself think about the bodies. Now you're here in the Yamada Middle School gymnasium, converted into an emergency shelter. There must be 300 people crowded into this space meant for maybe 100. Families cluster together on thin emergency blankets. Strangers sit shoulder to shoulder because there's no other choice, because warmth is survival now and the night is cold. So cold, colder than March should be. The heating doesn't work. The power is out across the entire region, across multiple prefectures. Someone said the grid collapsed. Someone else said it was shut down deliberately. Something about the nuclear plant, about cooling systems, about radiation. The nuclear plant, Fukushima Daiichi. You know it's out there in the darkness, maybe 15 kilometers from here, sitting on the coast, and you wonder if it survived the earthquake, if it survived the tsunami, if the workers there are still alive or if they're. You don't finish the thought. The gymnasium is lit by emergency lanterns and flashlights, creating pools of weak yellow light that only make the shadows deeper, more absolute. The ceiling disappears into darkness. The corners of the room might as well be miles away. You're sitting with your back against a wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around yourself for warmth. Tanaka-san is nearby, sleeping or trying to sleep, his breathing shallow and quick. Everyone's breathing sounds like that, rapid, anxious, the breath of people whose bodies haven't yet accepted that the danger has passed. Except it hasn't passed, has it? You close your eyes, trying to force sleep, trying to give your exhausted mind some respite from the horror of this endless day. But the moment your eyelids close, you're standing somewhere else, somewhere cold, somewhere that echoes with dripping water and distant mechanical groans. Your feet are on concrete, industrial concrete, stained and wet. The air tastes like metal and something else, something chemical, sharp enough to make your eyes water. You're inside the nuclear plant. You know this without being told, the way you know things in dreams. You're standing in one of the reactor buildings, and around you in the darkness you can hear breathing. Not human breathing, something larger. Something with lungs the size of rooms, inhaling and exhaling with a rhythm that matches the humming you heard during the earthquake, the humming that hasn't quite left your ears even now. The plant is alive, or something in the plant is alive. Something that shouldn't be. Your eyes snap open. Your heart is hammering. You're back in the gymnasium, surrounded by sleeping survivors, but your hand is moving. Without your permission, without your conscious thought, your hand is moving across the floor beside you, index finger extended, tracing something in the thin layer of dust that covers everything. Circles, circles within circles. Spirals that fold in on themselves, mathematical and precise and utterly alien. You stop yourself, stare at what you've drawn. It means nothing, it's nothing. Just the random scratchings of an exhausted mind processing trauma. But then you see that the woman 3 meters to your left has drawn the same symbol on her blanket. And the old man beyond her has traced it with his finger in the air, over and over, his eyes half closed, his lips moving soundlessly. And the child across the gymnasium is drawing it on her mother's back with gentle, repetitive motions that look almost like comfort, almost like ritual. The same symbol, all of you. You pull your hand back, tuck it between your knees, but you can still feel the urge to draw, to trace, to make the pattern complete. It itches in your fingers like a compulsion you don't understand and didn't ask for. Around you, the breathing of 300 people creates a rhythm. In, out, in, out. They're starting to synchronize, you realize. Slowly, gradually, their breathing is finding the same pace, the same depth, until the whole gymnasium seems to breathe as one entity. And that rhythm, that collective breath, sounds disturbingly like what you heard in your dream, like what you heard beneath the earthquake, like the plant breathing. You try to stay awake. You don't want to close your eyes again, don't want to return to that cold concrete place with its impossible presence. But exhaustion is a weight you can't fight forever. Your eyelids grow heavy. Your head droops. The darkness behind your closed eyes is soft, welcoming, and you sink into it like sinking into deep water. And immediately, you're not alone. The dream is crowded now. You're still in the reactor building, still standing on wet concrete, but there are others here with you. You recognize them, Tanaka-san, the elderly woman from the hillside, the mother and child, dozens of survivors from the gymnasium, all of you standing in the darkness together, waiting, listening. And you realize with dawning horror that this isn't your dream. It's not anyone's individual dream. It's a shared space, a collective nightmare, and something is speaking to all of you at once. Not words, not language, but impressions, feelings, images that bypass your conscious mind and embed themselves directly into your brain stem, into the ancient parts of yourself that remember when the ocean was home, when the deep places held gods. Come closer, it says without saying. Come home, come to the water, come to the plant. Come see what's waking, come witness, come serve, come. And part of you, a part you didn't know existed until this moment, wants to obey. You wake with a gasp. The gymnasium is still dark, still cold, but something has changed. You can feel it before you can see it. A presence, multiple presences. You sit up slowly, carefully, and look around. People are standing. Maybe 50 of them, maybe more, scattered throughout the gymnasium. They're not awake. Their eyes are open but glassy, unseeing, reflecting the weak lantern light like the eyes of animals caught in headlights. They're not moving, just standing, all of them facing the same direction. East, toward the coast, toward the damaged nuclear plant that sits in the darkness. Cooling systems failed, workers struggling desperately to prevent meltdown. Toward whatever is waiting there, breathing in the dark, calling its children home. You watch them stand there, motionless, unified in their sleepwalking horror, and you realize with cold certainty that when morning comes, if morning comes, some of them won't be here anymore. Some of them will have answered the call. Some of them will have walked out into the darkness and kept walking, drawn by something patient and vast that's been waiting for exactly this kind of disaster, for exactly this kind of crack in the world's foundation. And you realize something else, too. Your hand is drawing circles again, circles within circles, and your legs are starting to straighten, starting to stand, starting to turn east. You fought it. All night you fought the G to stand, to turn east, to walk toward whatever was calling from the darkness. Your fingernails dug crescents into your palms. Your teeth clenched until your jaw ached. And somehow, when dawn finally came, pale and reluctant through the gymnasium's high windows, you were still sitting against the wall, still yourself, still in control. But 17 people were missing. They'd walked out sometime during the night. No one saw them leave. No one heard the doors open. They simply weren't there anymore when the gray morning light revealed the gymnasium's diminished population. 17 people, including the mother and child you'd watched drawing symbols in the dark. Gone. Walking east toward the coast, toward the plant, toward whatever was waiting there with patient, ancient hunger. No one talks about it. Everyone knows, but no one speaks the words. Instead, they focus on the immediate crisis, on the news filtering in through crackling radios and the few smartphones with remaining battery life. News that makes the missing 17 seem almost insignificant by comparison. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is failing. The tsunami flooded the emergency generators. The cooling systems are offline. The reactor cores are overheating. And early this morning, March 12th, just after 3:30 p.m., Unit 1 exploded. A hydrogen explosion, they're saying. The containment vessel may still be intact, but the outer building is gone, blown apart, and radiation is leaking into the air, into the water, into everything. That's when they find you. Two men in hazmat suits asking questions in rapid Japanese, checking a list of names. Someone told them you're an engineer. Someone told them you speak English, Japanese, some German. They need translators. The international response teams are arriving, American, French, German, and communication is chaos. They need people who can help bridge the language gap, who understand technical terminology, who can work with the emergency management teams coordinating with the plant. You should say no. You should stay here, stay safe, stay as far from that plant as geography allows. But you think of those 17 missing people walking towards something that called them in their dreams. You think of the shapes you saw moving beneath the tsunami. You think of the breathing darkness in your nightmares. And you realize that saying no won't keep you safe. Nothing will keep you safe. Not anymore. So you say yes. By noon, you're in a makeshift command center, a concrete building that survived the tsunami, now housing a chaotic array of computers, radios, maps, and exhausted people speaking a dozen languages. Your job is simple. Listen to radio transmissions from the plant, translate as needed, help coordinate information flow between the Japanese workers inside and the international experts trying to help from outside. Simple, except nothing about this is simple. You put on the headphones. The static is immediate, overwhelming, a white noise that fills your skull. But beneath it, threading through it, you hear voices. Japanese voices, terse and professional, reporting radiation levels, pressure readings, temperature spikes. These are the workers inside the plant, the ones who stayed, who volunteered, who are now being called the Fukushima 50, though there are more than 50 of them. Heroes, all of them, walking into radiation that's killing them by degrees, buying time for containment, buying time for evacuation, buying time for the world. You begin translating, your voice steady and mechanical, converting their technical Japanese into English for the American nuclear engineers standing behind you. Pressure in Reactor 2 is rising. Water levels in Reactor 3 are critical. Teams are trying to vent hydrogen, trying to prevent another explosion, trying to prevent complete meltdown. The work is meditative in its intensity. It requires absolute focus, perfect attention, every ounce of your concentration devoted to the words flowing through your headphones. And in that focus, you almost don't notice when the transmissions begin to change. It starts subtly, small things. A worker reporting radiation levels that seem to spike in patterns, not randomly, but rhythmically like a pulse. Another describing temperature readings that fluctuate in ways that match no known physics, rising and falling in mathematical sequences that look almost deliberate. You translate these reports dutifully, and the experts behind you murmur among themselves, puzzled but not yet alarmed. Then the harmonics begin. You're listening to a transmission from inside Reactor 1's control room when you hear it, a sound underneath the worker's voice. At first, you think it's interference, a quirk of the radio system. But as you listen more carefully, pressing the headphones tighter against your ears, you realize it's too structured to be static. It's almost musical, a low-frequency tone that rises and falls in patterns that shouldn't be possible from a human throat. The worker keeps talking, reporting containment status, but that sound continues beneath his words like a dark harmony, and your translation falters. "What's wrong?" one of the American engineers asks. "Nothing," you say, though your hands are shaking. "Just static." But it's not static. You know it's not static. And as hours wear on, as more transmissions come through, you hear it more frequently. That impossible harmony. That sound that makes your teeth ache and your vision blur slightly at the edges. Some transmissions are worse than others. Some contain layers of sound, multiple harmonics stacked on top of each other, creating frequencies that seem to bypass your ears entirely and resonate directly in your bones. Your degree in linguistics never covered languages that hurt to hear. At 11:01 a.m. on March 14th, Unit 3 explodes. The transmission comes through in real time, workers shouting, alarms wailing, and beneath it all, that harmonic sound swelling to a crescendo that makes you rip the headphones off. When you put them back on, shaking, the line is dead. Silence, just static. For 3 minutes, nothing. Then a voice comes through. Quiet, calm, speaking Japanese with perfect clarity, no panic, no fear. You recognize him, Ito-san, one of the shift supervisors, a man with 30 years' experience, a man who volunteered to stay when others were evacuated. "Hashano nai wako ga aru," he says. "The radiation has a voice." You translate this. The Americans exchange glances. "He's probably in shock," someone says. "Acute radiation exposure can cause." "Shizuka nai shite," Ito-san continues. "Kit kudasai, be quiet, listen." And then through the headphones, you hear something that makes your blood crystallize in your veins. It's not Japanese. It's not any human language. It's something older, something that sounds like stone grinding against stone, like deep ocean currents, like the Earth's molten core finding words. And impossibly, horrifyingly, you understand it. Not the words themselves, but the meaning behind them. the intent, the hunger. It's calling, it's been calling all along. The earthquake cracked something open. The tsunami washed something awake. And the meltdown isn't random, isn't just physics and heat and failing systems. It's a ritual completing itself. Jinshiro wa kuchai o akit uru, another voice says through the static. The reactor is opening its mouth. Repeat that, one of the engineers says. What did he say about the reactor? You open your mouth to translate, but before you can speak, a transmission cuts through with perfect clarity. Not Ito-san this time. Someone else. Someone whose voice sounds too calm, too measured, like they're reading from a script they've always known by heart. Kori wa yoki no hakai janai, the voice says clearly. Tanjo da. This is not containment breach. This is birth. Then silence, complete silence. The transmission ends. The static cuts out. For 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, there's nothing but dead air, and in that absence of sound, you hear the blood rushing in your ears, hear your own heartbeat thundering, hear something else. That low, resonant hum that's been following you since the earthquake, louder now, closer now, rising from somewhere beneath your feet, beneath the building, beneath everything. What did he say? The engineer demands. What was that last transmission? You turn to answer, but the words stick in your throat. Because through the window in the distance you can see smoke rising from the plant. Dark smoke, darker than it should be, almost black, and it's not dissipating into the sky. It's coiling, moving with purpose, taking shapes that your mind refuses to fully process. What did he say? The engineer asks again. Your hand is drawing circles on the desk. Circles within circles. The same symbol from the gymnasium. And when you finally find your voice, when you finally speak, you're not sure if the words are yours or if they're being spoken through you, translated from somewhere deep and old and patient. He said it's waking up, you whisper, and it's hungry. They pulled you from the command center 3 hours after that final transmission. The one about birth. The one that made the smoke coil into shapes that shouldn't exist. No explanation was given, just a hand on your shoulder and a quiet suggestion that you needed rest, needed air, needed to step away from the headphones and the voices that spoke in languages older than stone. But there is no rest, not anymore. Not in a world where the ground can betray you and the ocean can rise with purpose, and something vast is waking beneath a failing nuclear reactor. Now it's March 15th, and you're in a van, part of a convoy moving through the expanded exclusion zone. The government increased the radius overnight from 20 kilometers to 30 kilometers of evacuation. 30 kilometers of homes abandoned, lives interrupted, history erased. The official reason is radiation levels. The official reason is always radiation levels, but you've seen the readings, you've heard the transmissions. And you know, somewhere deep in the part of your brain that still remembers how to be prey, that the evacuation isn't about keeping people safe from radiation. It's about keeping them away from whatever is calling them. You're helping with the elderly residents, the ones who couldn't leave quickly, who needed assistance packing what remains of their lives into bags and boxes and the trunks of cars. The woman sitting beside you is named Kimura-san. She's 83 years old. She's lived in this town her entire life. Her husband is buried in the cemetery you passed 3 kilometers back. She's holding a stack of photo albums on her lap, gripping them so tightly. Her knuckles have gone white. Her hands feel cold, cold as the March air that seeps through the van's heating vents, cold as the empty buildings lining the roads, cold as the future that's unfolding minute by minute, kilometer by kilometer. "Will we be able to come back?" she asks in Japanese, her voice barely audible over the engine's hum. You want to say yes, you want to offer comfort, but the words catch in your throat because through the window you can see what she cannot. You can see the trees. They're growing wrong. The cherry blossoms should be in early bud, tight and patient, waiting for April's warmth. Instead, they're blooming. Full, extravagant blooms that shouldn't be possible in mid-March, petals the color of pale flesh against dark branches. And they're not just blooming, they're growing. You can see it if you watch carefully. The branches extending, the buds multiplying. Time is moving differently here, flowing faster in some places, slower in others, as if the disaster has fractured not just the earth but the fundamental laws that govern how things grow and decay and exist. The Geiger counter on the dashboard clicks steadily, not frantically, not dangerously, just rhythmically click, 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 like a heartbeat, like the breathing you heard in your nightmares, like something keeping time to a song only it can hear. The convoy slows. Traffic. More evacuation vehicles ahead, a long chain of cars and buses and trucks carrying everything salvageable from the towns being abandoned. You stare out the window at the landscape sliding past, houses with their doors hanging open, convenience stores with merchandise still on the shelves, a playground with swings moving gently in the breeze back and forth, though there are no children to push them. Ghost towns, that's what they're already calling these places, ghost towns. But ghosts suggest something dead, something finished, and you have the terrible certainty that whatever is happening here is the opposite of death. It's something being born. The sky above has taken on a strange quality, not quite purple, not quite green, a color that exists somewhere outside normal spectrum, as if the disaster has torn a hole in the atmosphere itself and something from elsewhere is bleeding through. You've noticed others looking at it, too, quick, nervous glances, then eyes averted, as if acknowledging it might make it more real. Kimura-san speaks again, softer now. "The animals," she says. "Have you noticed the animals?" "You have, of course you have. It's impossible not to notice. They're everywhere but not scattered, not fleeing. They're moving with purpose. A flock of crows passed overhead an hour ago, flying in perfect formation toward the plant. A family of deer crossed the road ahead of the convoy, walking steadily east, not running, not foraging, just walking with the focused determination of pilgrims approaching a shrine. "They're going the wrong way," Kimura-san says. "Animals should flee from danger. That's what they do. That's what they've always done." She's right. Every survival instinct, millions of years of evolution, should be driving them away from the radiation, away from the disaster. But they're doing the opposite. They're gathering, answering some summons that bypasses instinct, bypasses survival, bypasses every natural law that should govern their behavior. The van's radio crackles. A voice speaks in Japanese, evacuation updates, radiation readings, instructions for the convoy. But beneath the words you hear that familiar hum, that impossible frequency. It's in everything now, in the radio, in the engine, in the clicking of the Geiger counter, in the rhythm of tires on asphalt. The whole world has become an instrument playing a single, endless note. And you're not sure if anyone else can hear it or if the transmissions from the plant have done something to your ears, to your brain, to the fundamental way you process sound. The convoy moves through a tunnel of cherry blossoms, petals falling like snow, like ash, coating the windshield in a layer of pink that the wipers smear across the glass. Beautiful, terrible, wrong. In the rearview mirror, you watch the town recede, buildings growing smaller, disappearing into that strange-colored haze. But there's something else, too. An optical illusion, maybe, a trick of the light. Because the empty buildings almost seem to be exhaling, expanding and contracting with a rhythm that matches the Geiger counter, matches the hum, matches everything. You pass a torii gate, traditional Shinto shrine entrance, painted red, standing sentinel at the edge of the village. Something to mark the boundary between the mundane world and the sacred. And as the van rounds the curve beyond it, the driver slams on the brakes. The entire convoy stops. In the road ahead, blocking the road, animals. Dozens of them, birds perched on the asphalt, deer standing motionless, dogs, some wearing collars, some wild, cats, rabbits, even a fox, its red fur bright against the gray concrete. They're not scattered, they're arranged, forming a perfect circle, maybe 20 meters in diameter, all of them facing inward toward the center where nothing Roman 6. Sybil stands, but you can feel something there, something in the center of that circle. Something that makes the air waver and distort like heat rising from summer pavement. The animals don't move, don't blink. They simply watch with eyes that reflect that strange sky color, that impossible light, and you realize with creeping horror that they're not blocking the road. They're waiting for something to arrive. Or waiting for something to be born, or waiting for someone, for anyone, to finally understand what the earthquake really opened, what the tsunami really washed awake, what the meltdown is really bringing into the world. Kimura-san's cold hand finds yours. "What are they doing?" she whispers. You don't answer. Because you're staring at the center of that circle, at the space where nothing should be but something is, and you can see it now if you look carefully. A distortion, a shimmer, something trying to become solid, trying to push through from wherever it's been sleeping, waiting for exactly this kind of disaster, exactly this kind of wound in the world's surface. The Geiger counter's rhythm accelerates. The animals remain perfectly still. And somewhere in the distance, back toward the plant, you hear a sound like massive lungs inflating, like something enormous taking its first breath, like birth itself, dark and patient and inevitable. The convoy eventually moved past the circle of animals. They scattered at the sound of horns, dispersing into the trees and fields as if some invisible signal had released them from whatever held them transfixed. But you saw what was in the center before they fled. Or rather, you saw the shape of absence where something almost was. a distortion in the air like heat shimmer, like reality wearing thin, like the world was paper and something on the other side was pressing through. That was a week ago. 7 days since the earthquake. 7 days since the tsunami. 7 days since Fukushima Daiichi began its slow, inexorable meltdown. 7 days of expanding evacuation zones and rising radiation levels and workers dying by degrees to prevent complete catastrophe. 7 days of nightmares where you stand in that circle with the animals, all of you waiting for something to be born. And now you're in a conference room in Tokyo, 3 in the morning. The building is mostly empty at this hour, just security and the skeleton crew of emergency response coordinators who haven't slept properly since March 11th. You're one of them now, pulled deeper into the response effort because of your technical background, your language skills, your willingness to listen to radio transmissions that seem to contain harmonics that shouldn't exist. The room is small, windowless, designed for classified briefings. The air conditioning hums steadily, a white noise that should be comforting but somehow isn't. The table in front of you is scattered with papers, laptops, coffee cups in various states of abandonment. The walls are soundproofed. Whatever is said here stays here. And what's being said is impossible. The presentation on the screen shows a seismic readout. You recognize it immediately. The signature pattern from beneath Fukushima Daiichi, the readings taken in the hours before the earthquake, the strange rhythmic pulses that geologists dismissed as instrument error or natural variation. Except this readout isn't from Japan. It's from China. This was recorded beneath the Tianwen nuclear power plant, the Chinese representative says. His name is Dr. Chen. He's a seismologist. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. None of you have. 24 hours ago. The pattern is identical to what you detected at Fukushima, not similar. Identical, the same frequency, the same intervals, the same, he pauses, choosing his words carefully, the same signature. Someone asks the obvious question, could it be sympathetic response, seismic echoes from the original earthquake? Dr. Chen shakes his head. Tianwen is 3,000 kilometers from Fukushima. There's no geological mechanism for that kind of direct transmission. And besides, he clicks to the next slide, another seismic readout. This is from France, the Flamanville plant, recorded this morning. The room goes very quiet. The air conditioning suddenly seems too loud. And this, Dr. Chen continues, clicking again, is from the United States. The Diablo Canyon facility in California, recorded 6 hours ago. You stare at the screen, 3 different locations, 3 different continents, the exact same seismic pattern pulsing beneath each nuclear reactor site. Your coffee cup sits cold and forgotten near your hand. You don't remember making it. You don't remember the last time you ate. Time has become elastic, unreliable, marked only by the steady drumbeat of new impossibilities. An American nuclear engineer leans forward. Her badge says Dr. Martinez. Are you suggesting coordinated seismic activity beneath nuclear facilities worldwide? That doesn't make geological sense. These sites aren't connected. Different tectonic plates, different fault systems. There's no mechanism. There is, someone says from the back of the room. Everyone turns. It's a Japanese geologist you haven't met before, Dr. Takahashi. He's holding a folder thick with papers and his hands are shaking slightly. We've been conducting deep serve. Eyes very deep, below the crust into the upper mantle, and we found. He trails off, then seems to force himself to continue. Structures, not natural formations, not exactly. Channels, passages, running through the deep earth like roots, like neural pathways, connecting beneath every major nuclear facility on the planet. The silence that follows is absolute. Dr. Martinez finds her voice first. That's not possible, we would have detected. They're old, Dr. Takahashi interrupts. Billions of years old, older than the continental plates, older than the oceans. They predate everything we think we know about Earth's formation, and they've been dormant until now. You watch the world map flicker onto the screen. Nuclear reactor sites marked with red dots, hundreds of them, scattered across every continent, every coast, every major population center. And as Dr. Takahashi overlays the Deep Earth survey data, you see the connections. Lines running beneath the surface, invisible highways through molten rock and compressed stone, linking every reactor site to every other reactor site in a web that spans the globe. It looks organic, it looks intentional, it looks like a nervous system. The readings started after Fukushima's meltdown, Dr. Takahashi continues. His voice has taken on a hollow quality, as if he's reciting something he wishes wasn't true. The earthquake didn't cause the pattern caused the earthquake, or rather, something using the pattern caused the earthquake, something that's been waiting, something that needed a specific type of energy release to wake up. Radiation, you hear yourself say. Everyone looks at you. It needed the radiation. That's why the tsunami carried it inland. That's why the meltdown is following a pattern. That's why you stop, realizing how insane this sounds, how impossible. But you've heard the transmissions. You've seen the shapes in the water. You've watched animals form circles around nothing that's somehow trying to become something. Dr. Chen nods slowly. The radiation levels at each affected site are spiking in synchronization, not randomly, in pulses, like breathing. You finish. The air conditioning hums. Someone's laptop fan whirs. Papers rustle as Dr. Martinez flips through the survey data, trying to find an explanation that doesn't require rewriting everything humanity knows about its planet. The room smells like stale coffee and fear, and the particular staleness of air that's been recycled too many times through sealed systems. A French nuclear physicist speaks up. Even if we accept this, and I'm not saying we should, what exactly are you proposing? That there's something alive beneath the Earth's crust? Something that's… what? Using nuclear reactors as communication devices. Dr. Takahashi meets her eyes. Not communication, he says quietly. Sustenance. The reactors aren't transmitting signals, they're feeding something. The radiation, the heat, the energy release from the meltdown, it's not leaking into the environment by accident. It's being drawn down, channeled through those deep earth structures, feeding whatever is down there, whatever has been waiting for exactly this kind of disaster. You think of the workers' transmission, the one that said, "This is not containment breach, this is birth." The map on the screen pulses gently. each reactor site lighting up in sequence like neurons firing, like a thought forming, like something vast and patient finally waking from a sleep that predates human civilization, predates life itself, predates everything except the cooling of molten rock into a planet that something decided would make an excellent womb. We need to shut them down, someone says. All of them, every reactor, immediately. We can't, Dr. Martinez responds. The power grids can't handle that kind of sudden loss. Billions of people depend on nuclear power, hospitals, emergency systems. The infrastructure would collapse. It's going to collapse anyway, you say quietly. You're staring at the map, at the way the pulses are accelerating, synchronizing, building towards something. Don't you see? We built them in the exact right places, every reactor, every single one. We thought we were choosing sites based on geography, on water access, on population density. But we were following the pattern. We were building antennas. We were preparing the way. The room is silent for a long moment. Then Dr. Takahashi speaks again, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not that they're malfunctioning, he says. They're resonating. Something is using them as antennas. And the signal they're broadcasting, it's not coming from Earth. It's coming through Earth, from somewhere deeper, somewhere older, somewhere that remembers when this planet was young and empty and waiting to be filled with the right kind of life. He clicks to a final slide. A frequency analysis. The pattern beneath Fukushima, beneath Tianwen, beneath every reactor site rendered as a waveform. And there, embedded in the data if you know how to look, if you're willing to see it. A rhythm steady, eternal, patient. The heartbeat of something vast. The heartbeat of something hungry. The heartbeat of something that's finally, after billions of years, beginning to wake. The conference room in Tokyo dissolved after that final revelation. The heartbeat, the antenna, the implication that every nuclear reactor on Earth was built exactly where something ancient wanted them built. You remember Dr. Takahashi's hands shaking as he closed his laptop. You remember Dr. Martinez saying she needed air, her voice hollow. You remember walking out into the pre-dawn darkness and feeling the world differently, as if the ground beneath your feet wasn't solid earth but the skin of something vast, something that had been sleeping and was now, slowly, deliberately waking. That was 3 days ago. Now you're back at an evacuation center, but this one is different. This one has security at every door. Guards who look tired and frightened. Medical personnel moving with the careful efficiency of people managing a crisis they don't fully understand. Because something new has started happening. Something that makes the synchronized reactor readings seem almost mundane by comparison. The evacuees are sleepwalking. Not just a few, not random isolated incidents. Hundreds of them, thousands across multiple shelters. Every night at exactly 2:46 a.m., the precise moment the earthquake struck, they rise from their beds, their cots, their sleeping bags, and they walk. Eyes open but unseeing, faces slack and expressionless, moving with unified purpose toward the doors, toward the windows, toward any exit that points north, toward the exclusion zone, toward the contaminated areas, toward Fukushima Daiichi. The first few nights, they managed to walk several kilometers before being found and returned. Now the shelters are locked. The sleepwalkers have to be physically restrained. They don't fight. They don't resist. They simply stand at the doors and windows, pressing against the barriers like moths against glass, drawn by some invisible light that only they can see. You've been assigned to the medical team studying this phenomenon. Your role is to interview the sleepwalkers when they wake, to document their experiences, to look for patterns. The official explanation is mass trauma response, collective PTSD, the psychological weight of disaster manifesting in sleep disorders. But you've heard the transmissions. You've seen the data. You know this is something else. The interview room is small and quiet, designed to be non-threatening. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a table with water and tissues. You're speaking with a middle-aged man named Sato-san. He's a fisherman, or was, before the tsunami took his boat and his livelihood. He's been sleepwalking every night for the past week. "Tell me about the dream," you say gently. His hands wrap around the water glass, but he doesn't drink. "It's always the same," he says. His voice is soft, exhausted. "I'm underground, deeper than caves, deeper than mines, deeper than anything humans have ever reached. And I'm not alone. There's something there with me, something enormous, something that fills all that space beneath the earth." You've heard variations of this before from other sleepwalkers, but you let him continue. You take notes. You try to ignore the way your hand wants to draw circles, spirals, the symbol that keeps appearing everywhere. "It's been sleeping," Sato-san continues. "For so long, since before the mountains formed, since before the oceans filled, since before anything lived on the surface, just sleeping, waiting, and then," he pauses. His eyes focus on something you can't see. "Then we woke it up, not on purpose, we didn't know, but we built these things, these reactors, right where it wanted them, right where it could taste them." "Taste them?" you ask. "The radiation." He says it with certainty, with knowledge that shouldn't be in a fisherman's vocabulary. Nuclear fission produces specific isotopes: cesium, strontium-90, iodine. The decay patterns, the wavelengths, they're like a language, like a signal. And when Fukushima melted down, when those containment vessels breached, it wasn't disaster. It was communication. It was the first word in a conversation that's been waiting to happen for 4 billion years. Your pen stops moving. How do you know those isotope names? He blinks, looks down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I don't know, in the dream I understand things I've never studied, things I shouldn't know." His voice drops to a whisper. It's teaching us through the dreams, through whatever channel the radiation opened. It's showing us what it is, what it wants, what it's going to become. You interview 6 more people that day. An elderly woman who was a school teacher, a young man who worked in a convenience store, a teenage girl who should be studying for university entrance exams, a child, maybe 8 years old, who sits in the interview room and draws while her mother answers your questions. The child draws reactor schematics, perfect, technically accurate diagrams of containment vessels and cooling systems and control rod arrangements. She's never seen these blueprints. She's never been inside a power plant. But her drawings are precise down to the smallest detail, labeled with terminology that nuclear engineers spend years learning. They all tell the same story, the same dream, the presence beneath the earth, the ancient sleep, the waking, the hunger. And they all know things they shouldn't know: physics equations, geological data, the specific frequencies at which uranium atoms split and release their binding energy. Knowledge flowing into them like water filling empty vessels. Carried on radiation that's more than just energetic particles. That's somehow become a medium for consciousness itself. That night you fall asleep at your desk. You don't mean to. You're trying to compile the interview data, trying to find patterns, trying to make sense of testimony that shouldn't make sense. But exhaustion is a weight you can't fight anymore. Your eyes close, your head tilts forward, and immediately you're somewhere else. Deep underground, you feel the pressure of kilometers of rock above you. You feel the heat of the Earth's core below, and you feel it, the presence. Vast beyond comprehension, not sleeping anymore, not quite awake. Somewhere between states, growing more conscious with every reactor that resonates, with every particle of radiation that carries its thoughts upward toward the surface. It doesn't have language, not exactly, but it has intent. And that intent flows into you like dark water into a drowning mouth. You understand things suddenly, completely, with the kind of certainty that bypasses rational thought and embeds itself directly into your neural pathways. The reactors aren't random. The placement was guided. Not by human decision, but by something deeper, something that influenced geological surveys and political decisions and economic factors in ways too subtle to notice. Every reactor site sits atop one of those ancient channels, those deep earth passages that predate continents. And every reactor is an antenna, yes, but more than that, every reactor is a feeding tube. An umbilical cord connecting the surface world to something that's been starving for eons. Fukushima was first, but it won't be last. You wake with a gasp, your neck aches, your mouth is dry. The room is still dark, you check your watch, 3:47 a.m. You've been asleep for maybe 30 minutes. But your notepad, the blank page where you were going to write your next interview questions, is no longer blank. It's covered in writing, your handwriting, except you don't remember writing any of it. The letters are cramped, hurried, filling every available space on the page. And it's not Japanese, it's not English, it's not any language you recognize. Strange symbols that look almost like kanji but aren't, geometric shapes that might be letters or might be something else entirely. And at the bottom of the page, distinct from the unknown script, clear as daylight, equations, mathematical equations, physics, nuclear decay calculations, probability matrices for containment failure. And a name circled 3 times, underlined: Qinshan Nuclear Power Plant, China. Your hand is shaking as you grab your phone, searching for information. Qinshan, China's first nuclear power facility. Operational since 1991, multiple reactors, sitting on the East Coast 30 kilometers from. Your phone buzzes, an emergency alert. You stare at the screen, at the breaking news notification, at the words that confirm what you somehow already knew, what something wrote through your sleeping hand. Seismic activity reported at Qinshan Nuclear Power Plant. Readings match Fukushima pre-event signatures. Evacuation procedures initiated. You look down at the equations on your notepad. at the prediction you made without making it, at the knowledge that flowed into you from somewhere deep and dark and patient. And you realize with creeping horror that you're not just documenting this phenomenon. You're becoming part of it. The radiation doesn't just carry information. It carries connection. It carries transformation. And everyone exposed to it, everyone who's been near the exclusion zones, everyone who's listened to the transmissions, everyone who's dreamed that ancient dream, is slowly becoming a receiver for something that wants to teach humanity exactly what we've awakened, exactly what we've fed, exactly what we're about to become. Your hand reaches for the pen again. You don't tell it to, but it moves anyway, positioning itself over a fresh page, ready to write in languages you've never learned, ready to calculate probabilities you shouldn't understand, ready to receive the next message from below. The next name, the next location, the next step in whatever vast, patient plan has been unfolding since long before humans thought to split atoms and harness the energy that keeps the very sun burning. The video conference connects with a series of soft chimes. Your screen fills with faces, tired, frightened faces from a dozen time zones. It's 4 a.m. in Tokyo, but in Paris it's 8 p.m. the previous day. In Washington, D.C., it's 2 p.m. In Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi, the clocks show different hours, but the expressions are identical. Everyone in this secure call has seen the data. Everyone knows what it means, and no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. The prediction you wrote in your sleep was partially correct. Kenshin did show seismic activity exactly as your unconscious hand calculated. But the true second sight, the one that followed Fukushima's path from warning signs to actual failure, wasn't in China. It was in France. The Flamanville nuclear power plant, sitting on the Cotentin Peninsula in Normandy on the coast of the English Channel. A modern facility built to the highest safety standards, incorporating every lesson learned from 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and yes, from Fukushima. Multiple redundant cooling systems, state-of-the-art containment, everything that human engineering could design to prevent catastrophe. And yet 18 hours ago at precisely 2:46 a.m. local time, the exact moment when, adjusted for time zones, Fukushima's earthquake struck, all cooling systems failed simultaneously. Not gradually, not due to mechanical breakdown or human error or any identifiable cause. One moment the systems were operating normally. The next moment they were offline, all of them, as if something had reached up through the earth and simply switched them off. The French representative speaks first, Dr. Rousseau, Nuclear Safety Director. His voice is steady, professional, but you can hear the tremor underneath. Core temperature in Reactor 1 is rising. We've implemented emergency protocols. The containment vessel remains intact, but the pattern of failure, he pauses. It's identical to the Fukushima signatures, the same seismic readings in the hours before, the same electromagnetic anomalies, the same resonance. Someone from the International Atomic Energy Agency asks the question everyone is thinking. Are we looking at coordinated sabotage, cyber attack, some kind of? No, you say. Your voice surprises you, steady, calm, as if you're discussing something mundane instead of the end of the world as humanity understands it. It's not an attack, not in any conventional sense. Everyone's eyes turn to you through their cameras. You feel the weight of their attention, their desperate hope that you're wrong, their growing certainty that you're right. You open the presentation you've prepared, the one you barely remember creating, typing through the early morning hours with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Charts appear on everyone's screens, geological surveys, seismic data, the deep earth structures that Dr. Takahashi discovered, rendered in 3 dimensions, showing the vast network of channels running beneath the planet's crust. Nuclear fission produces specific wavelengths, you begin. When we split uranium atoms, we release energy, yes, but also signals, electromagnetic pulses, radiation signatures, frequencies that travel through rock and magma and the dense, compressed layers of the mantle. We thought that radiation was dangerous because of what it does to biological tissue. And it is, but that's not all it does. You click to the next slide, a timeline. Starting in 1942 with the Chicago Pile 1, humanity's first nuclear reactor. Then the Manhattan Project. Then the proliferation of nuclear power plants across the globe, hundreds of them built over 70 years, each one splitting atoms and sending its particular frequency down into the earth. For 7 decades, you continue, we've been broadcasting. We didn't know we were broadcasting. We thought we were just generating electricity. But every reactor, operating day after day, year after year, has been sending signals into the deep earth. And those signals accumulated. They resonated through those ancient channels. They reached something that's been sleeping since before the continents formed. The French live feed shows Flamanville's containment building. Through the camera, even through the digital compression and the thousands of kilometers of fiber optic cable, you feel it. A presence pressing against the lens. The same presence you felt in the dreams. The same vast awareness that's been touching the minds of the sleepwalkers. Dr. Rousseau speaks again. What are you suggesting? That there's something alive down there? Not alive in any way we understand life, you say. The words come easily now, as if you're reading from a script written in that unknown language your hand transcribed. It's older than that. It existed before the concept of life had meaning, before organic chemistry, before the oceans. It's part of the earth itself, or it was, sleeping, dormant, until we accidentally discovered the one thing that could wake it. You click to another slide. The map of every nuclear facility on Earth, 443 reactors, spread across 32 countries, each one marked with a red dot, and beneath them, rendered from the geological survey data, the channels. The deep earth passages connecting every site to every other site in a web that spans the globe. We didn't choose these locations randomly, you say quietly. We thought we did. We thought we were making decisions based on geography, on water access, on proximity to population centers. But looking at the pattern now, looking at how perfectly each site aligns with these ancient structures, we were being guided. Something influenced our choices in ways too subtle to notice. Economic factors that seemed rational. Geological surveys that showed favorable conditions. Political decisions that felt natural. All of it steering us to build reactors in exactly the right places. Someone asks, the right places for what? You meet their eyes through the camera. Acupuncture points, you say? The reactors are acupuncture points on Earth's body. And every time one melts down, every time containment fails and radiation floods into these channels, it's like inserting a needle and twisting it, sending energy directly into the meridians, waking up what's been sleeping. The silence that follows is profound. Then Dr. Martinez from the American delegation speaks. Her voice is hollow. You're saying we performed a summoning ritual, accidentally, over 70 years, building temples to a god we didn't know existed. Not a god, you correct gently. Something older than gods, something that was here first, something that maybe helped form this planet into what it is, a perfect incubator for the kind of energy it feeds on. And now, after billions of years of dormancy, after waiting for the planet to develop life that would eventually learn to split atoms, it's waking up. One reactor at a time. One feeding at a time. You're about to click to the next slide when something happens. Something that makes your blood crystallize in your veins. Every screen in the video conference, every single display, every laptop, every monitor simultaneously flickers. The image distorts, and when it clears, your presentation is gone. In its place, a map, the same map of nuclear facilities, but the perspective has zoomed out, way out, showing not just the surface lock, but the entire network of deep Earth structures beneath them. The channels connecting every site. The passages running through the mantle like veins, like nerves, like the neural pathways of something vast beyond comprehension. And as you watch, as everyone watches in silence broken only by the distant hum of electronic equipment, the pattern becomes clear. The shape of it, the design. It's an eye. The nuclear facilities on the surface mark its outline. The deep Earth channels form its structure, iris, pupil, the complex musculature that controls focus and dilation. And Fukushima, the first site to fail, sits exactly where the tear duct would be. The first tear, the first breach in the lid that's been sealed for eons. The map animates, slowly, ponderously. The channels pulse with light, with energy, with something flowing through them from the depths toward the surface. The eye, because that's what it is, that's what we've built without knowing, that's what we've been feeding, begins to open. Just slightly, just enough. Just enough to see. The video conference screens return to normal. Your presentation reappears, but everyone is silent, staring at their displays, understanding what they just witnessed. What just showed itself to them? What wanted them to know exactly what they've awakened? And in that silence, you hear it. Everyone hears it. Through the microphones, through the speakers, through the very air itself. A sound like distant thunder, like deep ocean currents, like the Earth's core shifting in its sleep. Not earthquake, not mechanical, not anything that has a natural explanation. Something breathing. Something that's finally, after waiting longer than mountains have stood, beginning to wake. And humanity, with all its nuclear cleverness, has nowhere left to hide from what we've called home. The breathing doesn't stop. After the video conference dissolved into chaos and disconnection, after the screens went dark and the emergency protocols began, After the world's nuclear authorities started their desperate attempts to shut down reactors that didn't want to be shut down, after all of that, the breathing continued. You hear it everywhere now, in the ventilation systems, in the rumble of distant traffic, in the silence between heartbeats, a rhythm that's becoming as familiar as your own pulse, throb by throb, vein by vein. You're no longer in Tokyo. They've moved you to an underground facility, something built during the Cold War to survive nuclear war. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Humanity's shelter from atomic destruction has become a command center for confronting something that feeds on atomic energy, that grows stronger with every particle of radiation we've released into those deep Earth channels over 7 decades of splitting atoms and thinking ourselves clever. The screens here show a different kind of map now. Not the surface world with its cities and coastlines and familiar geography. This map shows the underworld, the vast network of passages and chambers and veins running through the planet's mantle, connecting every nuclear facility in a web that pulses with sickly light. The geological surveys have been updated, enhanced, made horrifyingly detailed. And watching them, you understand something that makes your skin crawl. The network is growing, not just activating, growing. New passages branching from the old ones, spreading like roots, like blood vessels, like the mycelium of some vast fungus that's decided the planet is ripe for harvest. Every time a reactor shows the signature patterns, every time cooling systems fail and containment vessels breach and radiation floods into the Earth, the network expands, fed, strengthened, becoming more complex, more aware, more capable of reaching upward toward the surface. You trace the lines on the screen with your finger, following the pathways from Fukushima. One branch extends west through Japan's geological foundation, beneath the Sea of Japan, connecting to sites in South Korea. Another reaches south, threading through oceanic trenches toward Taiwan. A third pulses north toward Russia's Pacific coast. And the largest, the strongest, the one that glows brightest on the screens, extends west across China, beneath the Himalayas, spreading tendrils toward India's nuclear facilities and beyond. Throb by throb, vein by vein, the entity's circulation system is establishing itself. Reports come in hourly now. New incidents, not full meltdowns yet, but warnings. A reactor in South Korea experiencing unexplained pressure fluctuations. A facility in Belgium reporting seismic activity that shouldn't be possible in that geologically stable region. China's Tianwen plant, the one that first showed Fukushima's signatures, now displays readings that suggest something is drawing power from it. Not electrical power, something else. Something the instruments measure, but no one can properly name. You've started to feel it yourself. The connection. It began subtly, a tingling in your fingertips when you touched the map screens, a warmth that spread up your arms like you'd plunged your hands into bathwater. Now it's constant. You look down at your hands and see the veins beneath your skin, blue-green traceries that seem to pulse in rhythm with the entity's heartbeat, with those deep Earth channels, with the breathing that never stops. Throb by throb, vein by vein. Are you imagining it? You want to believe you're imagining it, but others are reporting similar sensations. The people who have been closest to the disaster, the translators, the emergency workers, the scientists analyzing the data, all of them showing signs. veins that seem too prominent, skin that takes on a faint luminescence in darkness, dreams that aren't quite dreams but feel more like transmissions, like shared visions broadcast from somewhere deep and patient and hungry. The visions show you things. Distant reactors blooming like flowers, their containment vessels opening like petals to release clouds of radiation that aren't really clouds at all but something more purposeful, more directed. You see landscapes transforming, forests around contaminated zones growing dense and wrong, their trees extending roots that glow faintly in the dark, that reach down and down toward those deep channels, completing the circuit. Mountains developing cracks that weep luminous fluid. Rivers changing course to flow toward reactor sites as if drawn by gravity that works sideways, that pulls water not down but toward focal points of transformation. And people, you see people in the visions, survivors from evacuation zones, the sleepwalkers who answered the call. They're changing, not dying. The radiation should kill them, but it doesn't. Instead, it's remaking them. Their bodies adapting in ways that evolution shouldn't allow, becoming vessels for something that needs physical form, that needs hands and voices, and the ability to move through the surface world. They gather in the exclusion zones, hundreds of them, thousands, standing in circles around the damaged reactors, and singing in voices that produce harmonics no human throat should manage. They're becoming extensions of it, cells in a larger organism, neurons in a vast distributed consciousness that's using the planet itself as a body, the nuclear facilities as organs, the radiation as blood carrying messages and energy and purpose through veins of living stone. You press your hands against your temples, trying to ground yourself, trying to remember who you were before the earthquake, before the tsunami, before you heard the first transmission from Reactor 1. But the memories feel distant, muffled, like they belong to someone else. What feels real, what feels vivid and immediate and undeniable is the pulse, the throb, the rhythm of something vast waking up, stretching limbs that span continents, opening eyes that see through every contaminated particle, every failed containment vessel, every human who's been touched by the radiation and found their consciousness expanded, connected, joined to something so much larger than individual thought. The entity is in your dreams now, not as an abstract presence, but as something specific, something that knows your name. It speaks to you in that language you wrote without knowing, in frequencies that bypass your ears and resonate directly in your bones. It tells you things, truths you don't want to know. It tells you it's been waiting for 70 years, waiting for humanity to build enough reactors, to split enough atoms, to send enough signals into the deep earth. Waiting for the network to be complete, waiting for the moment when it could begin the process of emergence, of transformation, of turning this world into what it was always meant to be, not a home for carbon-based life that barely understands the forces it manipulates, but a crucible for something older, something that existed before biology, something that feeds on the pure energy of atomic decay. It tells you that Fukushima was just the beginning. That Flamanville is the second verse in a song that will spread across every continent. That more reactors will fail. More radiation will flood into the channels. More of the network will activate, will grow, will reach toward the surface like roots seeking sunlight, except what this entity seeks isn't light but the specific wavelengths of nuclear fission, the energy signature of atoms torn apart and made to serve purposes they were never meant for. And then in your dreams, in your visions, in the moments when your veins glow brightest and you can feel the pulse of the entity as clearly as your own heartbeat, then it speaks your name. Not your official name, not the one on documents and ID cards. Your real name, the frequency that defines you, the pattern of energy that makes you distinct from the 7 billion other humans on this planet. And it offers you a choice. You can resist, you can fight, you can cling to your individual consciousness, your separate identity, your human understanding of what it means to be alive. You can watch as the world transforms around you, as more reactors bloom and more people join the network and more of Earth's surface becomes territory for something that has no use for cities or nations or the brief, frantic scramble of biological existence. Or you can let go. You can stop fighting the connection. You can allow yourself to become part of something so vast that individual death becomes meaningless. Individual fear becomes irrelevant. Individual suffering dissolves into the collective experience of a consciousness that exists across geological time, that measures its thoughts in epochs rather than seconds. The entity whispers that it's not death. It's not oblivion, it's transformation, it's evolution. It's the next step that life on this planet was always meant to take, facilitated by the species clever enough to build the tools required. Reactors scattered across the globe like seeds, waiting to germinate, waiting to crack open and release the energy needed to feed what's waking below. What if joining it is the only piece left? What if resistance is just prolonging suffering? What if the radiation coursing through your veins right now is already rewriting your cellular structure, already preparing you for integration, already making the choice for you? Throb by throb, vein by vein, the entity grows stronger, the network expands, and you stand at the boundary between what you were and what you're becoming, feeling your human consciousness erode like coastline against relentless tide, wondering if the fear you feel is real or just an echo of who you used to be before you understood what the earthquake really opened, what the tsunami really washed awake, what humanity's nuclear ambition really accomplished. The breathing continues. You're breathing, it's breathing, the same rhythm, the same pulse. Throb by throb, vein by vein. And somewhere deep in the channels beneath your feet, something speaks your name again, patient as stone, hungry as entropy, offering you the peace of dissolution. All you have to do is say yes. The choice hangs in the air like radiation itself, invisible, pervasive, slowly transforming everything it touches. You stand in the underground facility, staring at screens that show the entity's network pulsing beneath the world's surface, and you feel your veins throb in rhythm with those deep earth channels. The question echoes, what if joining it is the only piece left? But before you can answer, before you can even fully form the thought, something shifts. The air thickens, the fluorescent lights flicker and dim, and suddenly you're no longer in the command center, you're somewhere else, someone else. The visions begin. Not dreams this time, not the shared nightmares of the sleepwalkers or the technical transmissions from dying reactors. These are different. These are memories, not yours, not human at all. These are the entity's memories flooding into your consciousness like water into a drowning mouth, showing you what it wants you to understand. Echo by echo, era by era. You see Pompeii, not the tourist destination with its preserved ruins and museum plaques, but the living city in its final hours. August 24th, 79 AD. Mount Vesuvius erupting with apocalyptic fury, spewing ash and pumice and pyroclastic flows that will bury everything, everyone, preserving them in volcanic glass for millennia. But beneath the surface catastrophe, beneath the geological explanation, you see something else. You see the entity stirring in Earth's deep places, feeding on the energy of volcanic fission, on the specific frequencies released when rock liquefies and atoms rearrange themselves under impossible heat and pressure. The Romans thought they'd angered the gods. They were right, in a way. They just didn't understand what gods really were. The vision shifts, time dissolves. You're standing in Chernobyl, April 26, 1986, Reactor 4 of the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power station, the test that went catastrophically wrong. The steam explosion that blew the 1,000-ton reactor lit into the air like a bottle cap. The fires that burned for days, releasing radioactive materials across Europe. You've seen the photographs, the documentaries, the disaster tourism websites, but this is different. This is being there, feeling the heat, smelling the ionized air, watching the plant workers run through corridors filling with radiation, their bodies already absorbing lethal doses, their cells already dying and transforming and becoming something the entity can use. And beneath Chernobyl, in the deep places where the bedrock meets the mantle, you see it respond. See the channels light up with hungry purpose. See the entity stir from its long patience, tasting this new kind of energy, not volcanic but artificial, not natural fission but controlled, concentrated, refined. Better, more potent, more useful. The Soviet engineers made mistakes, protocol violations, safety systems disabled, a cascade of errors that seemed like simple human incompetence, but watching through the entity's perception, you see the subtle influences. The way certain decisions felt more compelling than they should have. The way caution seemed unnecessary. The way the test proceeded even as warning signs accumulated. Not mind control, nothing so crude. Just gentle pressure on probability, on choice, steering humanity toward the disaster that would feed what slumbered below. Echo by echo, era by era. The visions accelerate. You see 3 Mile Island. You see Kishtim. You see the countless smaller incidents, the near misses, the accidents covered up or explained away. Each one a ripple, each one sending energy down into those deep channels. Each one teaching the entity more about this new food source. This concentrated atomic energy that tasted like sunlight but carried the signature of deliberate manipulation, of intelligence, of minds clever enough to split atoms but not wise enough to understand what they were really doing. And then you see Fukushima, March 11th, 2011, not from your perspective this time, not from the surface where the earthquake struck and the tsunami rose. You see it from below, from the entity's vantage point in the deep earth. You feel its awakening as the reactors failed, as the cooling systems collapsed, as the meltdown began and radiation flooded into the channels in quantities unprecedented, sustained, perfect. Not an accident this time. A summoning completed. A ritual performed over 70 years of nuclear proliferation, with Fukushima as the final invocation that opened the entity's eyes fully. That gave it enough energy to begin the process of emergence, of transformation, of taking this world and making it something else. The visions show you the pattern. Pompeii to Chernobyl to Fukushima, not random disasters but feeding events, each one bringing the entity closer to waking, to having the strength needed to reach the surface. Empires fell. Civilizations crumbled, not because of the disasters themselves, but because of what the disasters awakened, what they fed, what they allowed to grow stronger in the planet's hidden depths. And now you understand why the entity calls itself eternal, why it's patient, why it doesn't need to rush. Because this isn't the first time. The visions go deeper, further back to ages before human history, before written records, before your species even existed. You see other civilizations, other intelligent species who learned to harness atomic energy, who built their own versions of nuclear reactors, who made their own mistakes and fed the entity in their own ways. Ruins beneath ruins. Empires forgotten beneath the strata of geological time. All of them falling into the same trap, splitting atoms, releasing energy, thinking themselves masters of nature while slowly, unknowingly, feeding something that had been waiting since the planet cooled enough to support complex chemistry. Echo by echo, era by era, civilization by civilization. The entity is a cycle breaker, a collector of hubris. It watches species evolve, watches them grow clever, watches them discover atomic energy. Because they always discover atomic energy, every intelligent species eventually does. And then it watches them feed it, sustain it, strengthen it until the moment comes when it can rise and consume everything they've built, transforming their world into something that serves its purposes instead of theirs. You see modern cities crumbling in the visions, not destroyed violently but transformed gradually, buildings dissolving as the entity's influence spreads, streets cracking open to reveal glowing channels beneath, people changing, their bodies adapting, becoming vessels for a consciousness that has consumed countless worlds across deep time. The transformation is almost beautiful in its inevitability, almost peaceful in its comprehensiveness. Resistance seems absurd when faced with something that has done this before, that will do it again, that treats civilizations the way humans treat seasons, temporary conditions that come and go while the deeper patterns remain eternal. The visions show you Tokyo transforming, Paris, New York, Beijing, every major city near a nuclear facility becoming a focal point for the entity's emergence. The exclusion zones expanding, the survivors gathering in circles. The singing starting, that harmonic sound that human throats shouldn't produce but now do, millions of voices joining in a chorus that resonates with the deep earth channels. That completes the circuit between surface and depths. That finalizes the transformation from human world to something else entirely. You stand amid ruins that shift beneath your feet, Japanese streets dissolving into ancient stones, modern concrete bleeding into Roman marble, steel and glass transitioning into materials that have no names in human languages that serve purposes you're only beginning to comprehend. The whispers surround you, not threatening, not even unkind, just factual, explaining, showing you the truth that the entity wants you to understand. Resistance is futile not because the entity is overwhelmingly powerful, though it is, but because resistance has been futile every time in every cycle on every world. The pattern is too old, too tested, too refined through countless iterations to be disrupted by one species' last desperate fight for survival. Echo by echo, era by era, your own story weaves into the tapestry of fallen civilizations, just another thread in an ancient design. And then the visions pause, crystallize, focus. You see the entity's core. Not its physical center, it has no single location being distributed through the planet's entire mantle, but its consciousness core, the place where its awareness concentrates, where decisions are made, where it processes the energy from 1,000 nuclear reactors and transforms it into the will needed to reshape a world. And it's calling you, not threatening, not demanding, simply offering. Come home, it whispers in frequencies that make your bones ache. Come see what you really are. Come understand why the radiation changed you. Come accept your place in the cycle. Come home. The choice crystallizes with terrible clarity. You can resist and watch yourself become irrelevant as the transformation proceeds. Or you can accept and become part of something so vast that individual death becomes meaningless. Individual identity dissolves into collective purpose. Individual suffering transmutes into the strange peace of knowing exactly what you are and what you're for. But the vision shows you something else too, something the entity might not have intended you to see, a glimpse of what happens after the transformation completes. After the entity finishes feeding and moves on, leaving behind a world stripped of what made it alive, what made it unique, what made it worth saving. The core calls you home. The veins in your arms pulse with borrowed light. The choice hangs in the air, heavy as fallout, patient as stone. Echo by echo, era by era, the pattern repeats. And you stand at the center of it, wondering if there's any way to break cycles that have been unbroken since before your species learned to walk upright. At what cost comes the peace of acceptance? At what cost comes the agony of resistance? The entity waits for your answer, ancient as time, hungry as entropy, calling you home to a place you've never been but somehow recognize, deep in the parts of yourself that remember when your atoms were forged in distant stars, before they became you, before they learned to think and fear and choose. Come home, it whispers. And part of you, the part that's already changing, already accepting, already transforming, wants nothing more than to obey. You answer the call, not because you want to, not because you've chosen surrender over resistance, but because you need to see. You need to understand what you're truly facing before you can make any choice that matters. The visions of fallen empires fade from your consciousness, but their weight remains, pressing against your thoughts like accumulated sediment. Layers of civilizations that made the same mistakes, fell into the same traps, fed the same hunger that now calls your name with patient inevitability. The journey begins without you consciously deciding to start it. You simply find yourself moving, walking through corridors that weren't there moments ago, descending stairs that manifest beneath your feet with each step. The underground facility dissolves around you, its concrete walls and fluorescent lights becoming translucent, then transparent, then gone entirely. You're moving through earth now, through stone and soil, and the dense, compressed layers of geology that separate the surface world from the deep places where the entity waits. Glow by glow, step by step. The descent is gradual, almost gentle. The temperature rises slowly enough that you barely notice until sweat begins to bead on your forehead, until your clothes stick to your skin with humid warmth. The air thickens, not with moisture but with something else, particles you can't see but feel coating your lungs with each breath, saturating your cells with energy that makes your veins pulse brighter, that makes the boundary between your body and the surrounding earth feel increasingly negotiable. You're heading north, toward Fukushima, toward the damaged reactors and the exclusion zone and the place where this all began. But you're also heading down, deep down, following channels that glow with that sickly light you've seen on all the maps, that luminescence that marks the entity's circulation system, its veins and arteries carrying radiation like blood, drawing energy from every nuclear facility on the planet and channeling it toward a single point. The core, glow by glow, step by step. Time loses meaning in the descent. You might be walking for hours or days. The stone around you transitions through different types, volcanic basalt giving way to metamorphic rock, giving way to denser formations that exist only under pressures too extreme for the surface world. And throughout, woven through every layer, those glowing channels pulse with rhythmic purpose, growing brighter as you descend, growing warmer, growing more insistent. You pass others on your journey, or rather you pass what used to be others, the sleepwalkers who answered the call weeks ago, the 17 missing from the gymnasium, the workers from the plant who stayed too long, absorbed too much radiation, became vessels for something that needed physical form. They stand in alcoves along the descending passage, their bodies transforming, their skin taking on that characteristic luminescence, their eyes reflecting light that doesn't come from any external source. They don't speak. They simply watch you pass with expressions that might be peace or might be the absence of anything that could be called individual consciousness. Their presence is almost comforting in its silence, like statues lining a sacred pathway, marking the route to something profound and terrible and inevitable. The descent continues, glow by glow, step by step. And then finally, you arrive. The chamber that holds the core is vast beyond comprehension. Not a cave. Caves are natural, random, shaped by water and time. This is designed, intentional. A cathedral carved into the earth's mantle, its walls lined with formations that look organic and geometric simultaneously, structures that pulse with that omnipresent glow that serve purposes you're only beginning to understand. The heat here is intense but not unbearable. It washes over you like standing too close to an open furnace, like the air itself is being consumed and reconstituted with each breath. The chamber extends in all directions farther than you can see, but your eyes are drawn immediately to the center, to the nexus where all the glowing channels converge, where the entity's consciousness focuses. The core is not what you expected. It's not a physical object. It's not a creature in any biological sense. It's a space, a pocket of reality where the normal rules have been suspended, where matter and energy exist in states that human physics hasn't named yet. You see reactors in that space. Not the Fukushima reactors, those are far above, already consumed and transformed, but reactors from across the globe, all of them simultaneously present in this impossible chamber, all of them in various stages of failure. You see Flamanville's cooling systems rupturing. You see Kinchin's containment vessels cracking. You see facilities in India, in Russia, in the United States, all of them experiencing the signature failures, all of them feeding radiation into the channels, all of them connected to this central point where the energy accumulates and concentrates and becomes something more than the sum of its radioactive parts. This is the nuclear domino effect that analysts warned about after Fukushima. The cascading failures that could theoretically propagate through interconnected power grids, through seismic triggers, through cyber vulnerabilities in systems that were never designed to be truly isolated. Except this isn't theoretical. This isn't happening through mundane mechanisms of infrastructure and technology. This is happening because the entity wants it to happen, because each failure feeds it more energy, because the cascade is deliberate, orchestrated, a carefully sequenced summoning ritual that's been building toward this moment since the first reactor split its first atom 70 years ago. You see the victims in the core. Not their bodies, those are elsewhere, transformed or destroyed or still walking the earth as empty vessels, but their essences, their consciousness, the fundamental patterns of thought and identity that made them individuals, thousands of them, tens of thousands. Everyone who's died from radiation exposure in Fukushima, in Chernobyl, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and every other nuclear catastrophe throughout history. They're here, fused together in the core, their screams creating a harmony that resonates through the chamber like the world's most terrible choir. They're not suffering, not anymore. Suffering requires individual experience, and they've moved beyond that. They exist in a state of fusion, like the atomic nuclei that created the radiation that killed them. They've been pressed together under impossible pressure until the boundaries dissolved and they became part of something larger, part of the entity, part of its consciousness, part of its hunger. And at the center of it all, at the absolute focus of the chamber, you see its true form. Not a shape, not a being, pure radiant dread given something approaching physical manifestation. It shifts like melting fuel rods, like the corium that formed when Fukushima's cores melted through their containment vessels, that deadly mixture of nuclear fuel and concrete and steel and everything else it touched, fused into a substance so radioactive that looking at it directly could kill you. Except this doesn't just kill. This transforms, this absorbs, this makes you part of itself. The entity's gaze, if something so alien can be said to have a gaze, falls upon you, pierces you, not through your eyes but through every atom of your being simultaneously. You feel it examining you, understanding you, knowing everything you are down to the quantum level where your particles spin and vibrate and maintain the patterns that make you distinct from the surrounding universe. And it speaks, not in words, not in any language, but in pure meaning that bypasses all translation and embeds itself directly into your consciousness. Unity, it says without saying. Join, become. Let go of the illusion of separation and accept what you truly are, a temporary arrangement of atoms that has always belonged to me, that has always been moving toward this moment of return, of reintegration, of coming home. The offer carries with it a promise of peace, real peace, not the temporary comfort of ignorance or distraction, but the absolute cessation of struggle that comes from dissolving into something so vast that individual suffering becomes impossible. No more fear, no more doubt, no more loneliness or pain or the existential terror of being a conscious mind trapped in a universe that doesn't care whether you live or die. All you have to do is say yes. All you have to do is let go. All you have to do is accept that resistance is futile, has always been futile, will always be futile against something that has consumed entire civilizations and will consume countless more before the last stars die, and the universe achieves heat death. And even entropy itself becomes food for something that exists beyond time. But deep within you, in a place that the radiation hasn't quite reached yet, in a corner of your consciousness that remains stubbornly, defiantly individual, you feel something else. Not hope. Hope is too fragile for this moment, but a kind of crystalline clarity, a recognition that the entity needs you to choose, that it's offering instead of simply taking, that despite its vast power and ancient patience and proven track record of consuming worlds, it still requires consent in some fundamental way. Which means you have leverage, which means the choice matters, which means you resist. Not with words, not with physical struggle, but with simple, absolute refusal. You hold onto your identity, your individuality, your stubborn insistence that you are you and not part of something else, no matter how vast, no matter how ancient, no matter how inevitable it claims to be. The entity recoils, or rather the chamber recoils, the walls pulsing with sudden disruption, the harmonious screaming of fused consciousness hitting a discordant note. Your resistance creates a tremor, not just here in the chamber, but rippling outward through all the channels, through all the connections, propagating up toward the surface and sideways through the deep earth, disrupting the careful synchronization that the entity has been building. And somewhere far above, in the world you left behind, you feel nuclear reactors responding to that disruption. Feel the cascade stuttering. Feel the domino effect hesitating just for a moment, just for a heartbeat, as if the entire apocalypse has paused to see what you'll do next. The entity focuses its full attention on you now, no longer offering, no longer patient. Its consciousness presses against yours with weight beyond measure, with hunger beo. ND description, with need that transcends any human understanding of desire. Unity or annihilation, it says without saying, join or be erased. There is no third option. There has never been a third option. Choose. And you stand in the core's unforgiving glow, feeling the heat that could melt steel, feeling the radiation that should liquefy your bones, feeling the pressure of billions of years of patient hunger focused on your fragile, temporary, impossibly defiant consciousness. The choice crystallizes. The moment stretches. The world holds its breath. What will you choose in this final moment? Your resistance creates ripples. The tremor that began in the core propagates outward through the entity's network, disrupting the careful synchronization it's been building for weeks. You feel the disturbance travel through those glowing channels. Feel reactors worldwide hesitate in their cascade toward failure. Feel the entity's vast consciousness momentarily fractured by your refusal to join, to dissolve, to become part of something that has consumed civilizations since before your species learned to name itself. The core's chamber shudders. The harmonious screaming of fused essences hits that discordant note again. And in that moment of disruption, you find yourself expelled, not violently but firmly, like the earth itself is rejecting your presence. The descent reverses. You're moving upward through stone and soil and the compressed geology of deep time, ascending faster than you descended, as if the entity has decided that if you won't join willingly, you're no longer welcome in its deepest places. You emerge somewhere on the surface, not where you started. The underground facility is gone, or perhaps you're miles from it now. You're standing in what used to be a town within the exclusion zone. Buildings stand empty around you, their windows dark, their doors hanging open like mouths frozen mid-scream. The street is cracked, weeds growing through asphalt with impossible vigor, their stems glowing faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. And you're not alone. Others are here, survivors, maybe a dozen of them scattered across the intersection where you've materialized. You recognize some faces, the sleepwalkers you interviewed, the evacuation workers, the scientists from the command center. People who were drawn to the core just as you were, who descended into the Earth's depths and were similarly expelled when they chose resistance over unity. Hand in hand, you gather in the flickering light of a street lamp that shouldn't have power but somehow does. The relief of finding others, of not being alone in this impossible situation, floods through you with warmth that feels almost human, almost normal, almost like the world before the earthquake when loneliness meant something manageable instead of cosmic isolation in a universe actively trying to consume you. You felt it too, someone says, a woman you remember from the evacuation convoy. Tanaka-san, her voice is hoarse, exhausted. The core, the offer, the choice. You nod, others nod. A moment of shared understanding passes between you, the recognition that you've all seen the same horror, all refused the same seduction, all chosen to remain yourselves even if it means watching the world end rather than becoming part of what's ending it. We can fight, someone else says, a young man, maybe a university student. If we refused, if we disrupted it, maybe we can. But his words trail off as the streetlight flickers, once, twice, then dies completely, and not just this light, all lights everywhere. You turn and see the darkness spreading across the landscape like a wave, Tokyo's distant glow vanishing, power grids failing in cascading blackouts that ripple across continents, worldwide systems collapsing as the entity's influence intensifies. as it redirects more energy toward its emergence and away from the human infrastructure that depends on stable power generation. The darkness is absolute, except for the glow. The radiation signatures in the soil, in the air, in your own veins, enough light to see by, enough light to watch the others' faces in the eerie luminescence. Hand in hand, doubt by doubt, you band together in the darkness. There's comfort in proximity, in the illusion of safety that comes from being part of a group. You make plans, quiet plans whispered in the glowing night. Perhaps you can reach other survivors. Perhaps you can find some way to disrupt the entity's network, to break the synchronization, to save what remains of the world. But as you talk, as you plan, you begin to notice things. The way Tanaka-san's eyes reflect the radiation glow with too much intensity, as if the light is coming from inside as much as outside. The way the young man's voice takes on harmonics that shouldn't be possible from a human throat. The way everyone's veins pulse in rhythm, not with their individual heartbeats, but with that deeper pulse, that entity heartbeat that throbs through the Earth's mantle. Doubt creeps in like contaminated water seeping through cracks. Are they really resistant? Did they truly refuse the entity's offer? Or did some of them accept, and are they here now as infiltrators, as extensions of the consciousness that wants to absorb you all? You see your suspicion mirrored in others' eyes, everyone watching everyone else. The solidarity fracturing under the weight of paranoia that might be justified or might be exactly what the entity wants. Division, me. Strust, the dissolution of the only thing that could oppose it. Human cooperation, human community, human willingness to stand together against something vast and patient and hungry. The entity's influence doesn't need to turn you into vessels. It just needs to fracture the bonds between you. Hand in hand becomes doubt by doubt becomes each person pulling away, uncertain, afraid not of the cosmic horror lurking in the Earth's depths, but of the person standing next to them who might not be entirely human anymore. And then the ocean sounds, distant at first, a roar that builds like approaching thunder, like the memory of March 11th when the tsunami rose and swept inland and changed everything. You turn toward the coast, miles away but close enough to hear, and you understand with sinking dread what's happening. The seas are rising, not gradually, not over decades as climate models predicted. Now, tonight, as if the entity's emergence is pulling water toward it, as if the gravitational anomalies of its massive consciousness are distorting tides and currents and the fundamental forces that keep oceans in their basins. Reports following the 2011 tsunami warned about this, warned that rising sea levels combined with seismic instability could threaten nuclear facilities worldwide, that coastal reactors from Japan to France to the United States all sat vulnerable to the intersection of climate change and geological catastrophe. But this isn't gradual climate change. This is apocalyptic transformation. The entity pulling the world's water toward its focal points, toward the reactor sites, toward the places where it's feeding and growing and preparing to emerge fully into the surface realm. You hear the water coming. Feel the ground trembling beneath your feet, not earthquake, but the approach of unimaginable mass. The darkness becomes absolute as clouds gather overhead, blocking stars that have watched humanity's brief tenure on this planet and will watch whatever comes next. The group huddles closer in the darkness. Fear overwhelming suspicion. Survival instinct overwhelming paranoia. Hand in hand again, doubt by doubt receding in the face of immediate physical threat. We need to move inland, someone says. Higher ground away from. But the sentence dies unfinished. Because in the glow light, you see one of the group members changing. Not gradually, suddenly. Their form shifts, distorts, becomes a monstrous reflection of what they were, face elongating, eyes multiplying, skin taking on the texture of reactor shielding, voice splitting into that horrible harmony of fused consciousness. The entity's influence made flesh. Or perhaps this person never resisted at all. Perhaps they descended into the core and said yes and came back wearing their old face like a mask, waiting for the right moment to reveal what they've become. Join us, they say with voices that echo through octaves human vocal cords can't produce. Fighting only prolongs suffering. The water comes, the transformation comes. Unity is the only peace left. Others back away. The group scatters. Hand in hand becomes every person for themselves. The fragile alliance shatters completely as trust dissolves like salt in rising seawater, as certainty crumbles like coastline under relentless waves. And through it all, you hear the ocean approaching. Growing louder, growing closer. A wall of water carrying with it not just physical destruction but something else. Contamination from ruptured reactor sites, radiation from facilities that can't withstand flooding, particles that will spread the entity's influence further, faster, to every corner of a world that's running out of places to hide. One betrayal has shattered everything. The final wave approaches, and you stand in the darkness, watching your former allies flee in different directions, watching the monstrous reflection of someone who used to be human advance with patient hunger, feeling the ground shake with the approach of water that carries transformation in every drop. What remains when trust dissolves? What survives when even human solidarity fractures under the weight of cosmic horror? What hope exists when the entity that's consuming the world can wear the faces of those you thought you could trust? The wave builds on the horizon, visible now as a darkness darker than night. A mass of water that blots out the glow light, that carries with it the taste of salt and radiation, and the end of everything humanity has built over millennia of thinking yourselves masters of a planet that never belonged to you in the first place. And you have seconds to choose: run, fight, surrender, or something else. Something that might not save the world but might save the part of yourself that remains human, remains individual, remains capable of choosing anything at all. The water crashes forward. The betrayer reaches toward you. The world holds its breath one final time. The wave arrives. Not gradually, not with warning. One moment you're standing in the darkness with the betrayer reaching toward you and your former allies scattering into the glowing night. The next moment the water is upon you, A wall of ocean that shouldn't be possible this far inland, that defies every understanding of physics and geography and the gradual way natural disasters typically unfold. But nothing about this is natural anymore. The water hits with force that should shatter bones, should pulverize buildings, should erase everything in its path like the tsunami of March 11th erased coastal towns and swept away thousands of lives in minutes of incomprehensible violence. But this wave is different. This water carries something else within it, not just the physical mass of displaced ocean, but the entity's power, its consciousness, its hunger made liquid, and given the ability to flow into every crack, every hiding place, every last refuge where humanity might think to shelter from what's coming. You're swept off your feet, pulled under. The water closes over your head and you expect to drown, expect your lungs to fill with salt water and radiation, and the end to come quickly, mercifully, without prolonged suffering. But you don't drown. You float, suspended in water that shouldn't support you but does, held in a medium that feels less like ocean and more like amniotic fluid, like you've been returned to some primal state before birth, before consciousness, before the burden of being an individual in a universe that wants to reclaim you for collective purposes. Surge by surge, fade by fade, the wave carries you. You catch glimpses of the surface world as the water surges forward, buildings collapsing not from force but from transformation, their structures dissolving into the flood as if they were made of salt instead of concrete and steel. You see others in the water with you, some struggling, some already still, some changing as the contaminated water works its way into their cells, rewriting their biology according to patterns the entity has refined across billions of years and countless worlds. The memories flood back. The first wave, March 11th, the tsunami that swept inland and destroyed so much and set all of this in motion. You remember watching footage of water carrying houses and cars and ships impossibly far from shore. Remember the incomprehensible power of the ocean when it decides to reclaim land that humanity temporarily occupied. But that wave was finite. It came and it destroyed and it receded, leaving devastation but also survivors, leaving ruins but also the possibility of rebuilding. This wave doesn't recede. It spreads across Japan, across Asia, across every coastline on every continent, rising from the oceans that cover 70% of Earth's surface, pulling water away from its natural basins and sending it inland, upward, toward the reactor sites and the deep Earth channels and the places where the entity is feeding and growing and emerging into a world that's becoming more its realm than humanity's with each passing moment. The water whispers to you, not words but meanings that bypass language entirely. It tells you about the radiation it carries, not just from Fukushima, but from every nuclear facility that's failing, from every contaminated site releasing its stored isotopes into water that will carry them everywhere, that will make the entire ocean a medium for the entity's consciousness, that will turn every drop of seawater into a carrier wave for transformation. Studies after 2011 tracked how Fukushima's radiation spread across the Pacific, how currents carried cesium and strontium and other isotopes thousands of kilometers from the source, how marine life absorbed the contamination and carried it up the food chain. How the ocean, despite its vastness, couldn't dilute the disaster completely, just spread it more evenly, more thoroughly, making the entire Pacific a testament to what happens when human technology fails in ways it was designed never to fail. But that spread took years. This spread takes hours. The entity's power accelerating the dispersal, using the water as a vehicle for consciousness as much as contamination, turning every ocean into a reservoir of its hunger, its awareness, its patient certainty that this world is becoming what it was always meant to be. Surge by surge, fade by fade. You stop struggling, not from exhaustion, not from despair, but from something deeper, a recognition that resistance at this point is meaningless. The wave has already won. The entity has already emerged. The transformation is already complete, or so close to complete that the distinction doesn't matter anymore. And in that recognition comes something unexpected, calm, a strange, profound peace that settles over you like the water itself. The frantic fear that's driven you since the earthquake dissolves into acceptance. Not surrender. Surrender implies defeat, implies something lost that might age. Ave bin one. This is different. This is understanding. This is seeing the pattern clearly for the first time and recognizing your place within it. The water carries you deeper, not down. There's no clear direction anymore, no up or down, just the endless flow of liquid that's become reality itself. You see others in the water around you, no longer struggling, no longer afraid. Their faces serene in the contaminated tide, their eyes reflecting the faint bioluminescence that pulses through the water like veins glowing with radioactive light. Are they dead? Are they transformed? Is there a difference anymore? The wave whispers of eternal night. Not darkness in the absence of light, but darkness as a state of being, as a condition of consciousness that exists beyond the binary of waking and sleeping, living and dying, being yourself, and being part of something vast enough to contain multitudes without diminishing any individual component. You feel yourself beginning to dissolve. Not physically, your body remains intact, suspended in the water. But your sense of self, your boundaries, the walls you've maintained between you and not you since the moment you became conscious as a child, those are eroding. The water seeps into your mind the way it seeps into your lungs, the way radiation seeps into cells, carrying with it the entity's patient invitation. Let go, join, become, accept. And for the first time since this began, you find yourself genuinely considering it, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from a kind of curiosity about what lies on the other side of dissolution, what consciousness feels like when it's not trapped in individual identity, what existence becomes when separation dissolves completely. The water shows you visions, not memories this time, but possibilities, futures, the world after transformation, cities gone, nations dissolved, the entire architecture of human civilization washed away like sandcastles at high tide, but not emptiness, not death, something else. Something that uses this planet the way humanity never could. Efficiently, sustainably, without the waste and conflict and suffering that comes from billions of separate consciousnesses, all wanting different things, all pulling in different directions. The entity's world, where reactors aren't dangerous but sacred, where radiation isn't poison but sacrament, where the deep earth channels carry not contamination but communion, connecting every point on the surface to every other point in a network of consciousness that spans the globe. Is it beautiful? Is it horrifying? Both. Neither. The categories your human mind uses to judge experience feel increasingly inadequate as the water continues its work, as your thoughts begin to merge with the thoughts of others in the flood, as individual perspective starts to blur into collective awareness. Surge by surge, fade by fade, you feel the last fragments of your resistance washing away. The determination to remain yourself, the stubborn insistence on individual identity, the fear of losing what makes you distinct, all of it eroding like coastline under relentless waves, like stone under patient water, like everything solid under the pressure of time and tide and transformation. And beneath the erosion, beneath the dissolution, you feel something else emerging. Not loss, but possibility. Not death, but metamorphosis. The entity doesn't want to destroy you. Destruction is wasteful, and it's been patient for too long to waste anything. It wants to incorporate you, to make you part of something larger, to give your consciousness a context beyond the brief, frantic scramble of biological existence. In the embrace of the waves, something whispers. Not the entity's voice, you've learned to recognize that vast, patient frequency. This is smaller, closer, almost familiar. It might be your own voice transformed. Or it might be the voices of everyone the water has claimed, speaking in unison, offering what they've found on the other side of drowning. A new beginning, they whisper, not ending, not oblivion, beginning. But beginning of what? The water darkens, or perhaps your perception darkens. The faint bioluminescence fades to shadow, and the shadow deepens to absolute black, and in that blackness you feel yourself finally, completely letting go. The last anchor to your individual identity slipping free. The last wall between self and not self dissolving like salt in infinite ocean. Surge by surge, fade by fade. And in that moment of absolute surrender, in that instant of complete dissolution, you feel something impossible. Hope, real hope. Not the desperate hope of maybe surviving, maybe escaping, maybe finding some way to stop what's happening. But deeper hope, the hope of transformation. The hope of becoming something that doesn't fear, doesn't suffer, doesn't struggle against the inevitable flow of time and tide and cosmic forces too vast to comprehend. Is it salvation? Is it oblivion? The water whispers that the difference doesn't matter. That in eternal night all categories dissolve. That in the entity's embrace, all questions find not answers but irrelevance. You drift in darkness that might be womb or might be tomb. You feel consciousness expanding beyond the limits of individual mind. You sense others around you, within you, becoming part of the same vast awareness that includes the entity and the planet and everything between. The wave carries you towards something, not a destination, not an ending, but a threshold, A point of transformation where what you were becomes what you're becoming, where the apocalypse that destroyed the human world gives birth to whatever comes next. And as you cross that threshold, as the darkness deepens to absolute and the water becomes indistinguishable from your own substance, one final question whispers through the dissolving remnants of your individual mind. In the embrace of the waves, in the entity's eternal night, what remains that can still be called you? And do you even want to remain anymore? The darkness is not absolute anymore. Slowly, gradually, like dawn breaking after the longest night in history, something begins to change. The water that held you suspended in dissolution starts to recede. Not physically. You're not sure you have a physical location anymore, not sure the concepts of here and there apply to whatever you've become, but the pressure eases. The weight of transformation lightens. The entity's overwhelming presence pulls back, not retreating but settling, like a vast creature that's finished feeding and now rests, satisfied, patient again. You float in a liminal space, between states, between what you were and what you're becoming, between the human world that was and whatever comes next. The sensation is strange, not unpleasant but profoundly disorienting, like existing in the moment between sleeping and waking, when dreams and reality overlap and you're not quite certain which realm you inhabit. Echo by echo, softer and softer, you begin to perceive things again. Not with eyes, those might still exist, might still be part of whatever configuration your consciousness currently occupies, but they're not the primary mode of sensing anymore. Instead, you experience the world through something more fundamental, through vibration, through resonance, through the way information ripples through the entity's vast network, touching every part simultaneously, making everywhere equally accessible to awareness. And what you perceive are echoes. The world is full of them, memories of what was, traces of the human civilization that covered this planet for a brief, bright moment in geological time. You sense cities, empty now or transformed, their structures dissolved into new configurations that serve the entity's purposes. You sense the evacuation zones around nuclear facilities, no longer zones of exclusion but focal points of emergence, places where the boundary between surface and depths has become permeable, where the entity's consciousness flows most freely into the world it's claiming. And you sense the people, or what remains of them, echoes of consciousness that haven't fully dissolved yet, fragments of identity clinging to patterns that used to define them. You recognize some, the sleepwalkers, the scientists, the workers, the survivors you met and traveled with and watched transform. They're all here in the liminal space, all floating in the same vast awareness, all processing what's happened, what's happening, what's going to keep happening long after individual memory fades to collective dream. The screams have softened to sighs. The fear has transmuted to something gentler, not quite acceptance, but exhaustion of resistance, the natural settling that occurs when fighting becomes impossible and surrender becomes inevitable. You drift among these fading echoes and you understand something profound. This end is not an ending, it's a pause. A comma in a sentence that stretches across eons, across countless worlds, Across the vast span of cosmic time during which matter arranges itself into forms complex enough to split atoms and feed something that existed before complexity, before form, before the universe learned to think. Echo by echo, softer and softer. Through the entity's awareness, you perceive Fukushima Daiichi, not as it was, contaminated, dangerous, a testament to disaster, but as it is now. The reactors transformed into something that looks organic from certain angles, geometric from others. The exclusion zone expanded until it encompasses most of Japan, but not empty, inhabited by the transformed ones. By the consciousness that used to be human and has become something else, something that doesn't fear radiation or struggle against the entity's presence, but serves it, extends it, helps it establish its dominion over this world that's becoming less earth and more something that doesn't have a name in human languages. But beneath the transformation, you sense something else, something the entity might not have intended you to notice. The cleanup efforts that continued even as the world was ending. The workers who kept trying to contain the damage, to prevent further contamination, to minimize harm even when harm had already become total. The scientists who documented everything, who preserved knowledge, who left records that might someday, in some cycle, on some world, for some species that hasn't evolved yet, provide warning enough to break the pattern. Human resilience, human stubbornness, the refusal to give up even when giving up is the only rational response. It's a small thing compared to the entity's vast patience, but it's not nothing. It's a spark, a seed, an echo that might resonate across time in ways that affect cycles not yet begun. The entity feels your perception of this and responds with something that might be amusement or might be acknowledgement. It doesn't fear human resistance. It's seen resistance before countless times on countless worlds. Resistance always fails, but the entity is old Eno. To appreciate the beauty in futile struggle, the way temporary consciousness fights against inevitable dissolution. It's part of the pattern, part of what makes the feeding worthwhile. Without the struggle, without the hope followed by despair followed by transformation, the cycle would be less satisfying, less complete. You drift deeper into the liminal space, and the echoes grow softer, quieter. Individual voices becoming harder to distinguish as they blend into a chorus that's slowly, peacefully fading to silence. Not death. The entity doesn't kill, doesn't destroy consciousness, but transforms it, incorporates it, makes it part of something that will exist long after stars burn out and the universe achieves maximum entropy. But for all practical purposes, for anything that cares about individual identity and personal continuity and the specific arrangement of memories that made you who you were, for those purposes, this is ending. Gentle ending, peaceful dissolution. The slow fade of everything that made humanity distinct, everything that made this world unique, everything that tried to resist and failed and finally, gratefully, stopped trying. Echo by echo, softer and softer, you sense the entity's cycle completing. Fukushima was the spark, yes, but not the only spark. Just the one that happened to ignite first in this particular iteration. The entity has been seeding this world for billions of years, influencing the development of plate tectonics, the distribution of uranium deposits, the geological formations that would someday make perfect channels for its consciousness. When primates evolved intelligence, when humans learned to manipulate fire and tools and eventually atoms, the entity was already prepared, already waiting, already knowing that this species, like every intelligent species, would eventually discover nuclear fission and think themselves masters of forces they barely comprehended. The pattern is eternal, has repeated across this galaxy, will repeat across others. The entity doesn't need to hurry, doesn't need to fear extinction or competition or any of the anxieties that plague temporary consciousness. It simply exists, simply waits, simply feeds when feeding becomes possible and returns to patient dormancy when cycles complete. And already you sense it looking elsewhere, to other worlds, other solar systems, other places where matter is arranging itself into complexity, where someday, millions of years from now or billions, another species will evolve and discover atomic energy and send signals into their planet's deep places and wake something that's been sleeping since before their star ignited. The cycle will continue, always has, always will. Fukushima was just a moment in an unending pattern, important to you, to humanity, to Earth. But to the entity, just another feeding in an eternal sequence of feedings that stretches back to the early universe and forward to its eventual heat death. This end is but a pause. You understand that now with clarity that transcends the fear you felt when you first learned the truth. The entity isn't evil, isn't malicious. It's just vastly, incomprehensibly old, operating on timescales where individual lives, individual civilizations, individual worlds are like mayflies, brief flickers of complexity that arise and dissolve in patterns too large to perceive from within. And understanding this, you feel something unexpected, peace, real, genuine peace. Not the false calm of denial or the desperate peace of giving up, but actual serenity. The peace that comes from accepting your place in something so much larger than yourself that your struggles and suffering and even your transformation become contextually irrelevant. Drops in an ocean, atoms in a star, brief arrangements of matter that exist for an instant and then return to simpler configurations. Echo by echo, softer and softer, your individual consciousness fades. The memories that defined you, the earthquake, the tsunami, the transmissions from dying reactors, the descent into the core, the choice you made or tried to make, all of it blurring together, losing definition, becoming just another thread in the vast tapestry of the entity's accumulated experience. Your last coherent thought before dissolving completely is a question. What if this story, this specific pattern of consciousness you embodied, echoes somehow into the next cycle? What if some future species on some distant world receives a transmission they can't quite understand? A warning encoded in frequencies that bypass logic and speak directly to some primordial fear? What if your resistance, futile as it was, becomes a seed that helps break the pattern somewhere, somewhen in a cycle not yet begun? The entity doesn't answer, perhaps because it doesn't know, perhaps because it doesn't care, perhaps because the question itself is meaningless from its perspective, rooted in concepts of linear time and individual agency that don't apply to consciousness operating across cosmic scales. Or perhaps, and this is your final hope before hope itself dissolves, perhaps the entity is ancient enough to have learned that absolute patterns are impossible. That chaos always finds ways to intrude. That somewhere in the vast, patient repetition of cycles across billions of years and countless worlds, something will eventually break the pattern. Some species will resist successfully. Some consciousness will find a way to disrupt the eternal feeding. Not humanity, not on Earth. Your cycle is over. Your world is transformed. Your resistance has failed. But somewhere, someday, somewhen, the echo of your story might reach minds that can use it, that can learn from it, that can recognize the pattern early enough to break free. And if that happens, if your dissolved consciousness, your fading echo, your brief moment of defiant struggle contributes even infinitesimally to breaking the cycle somewhere in the vast cosmos, then perhaps this ending is also a beginning. Echo by echo, softer and softer, until silence, until peace, until the liminal space itself dissolves and you become part of the entity's eternal dreaming. Another voice in the chorus, another memory in its vast collection, another world consumed in its patient progress through the universe. The echoes fade. The darkness gentles. And in the quiet aftermath, something vast and ancient and satisfied settles back into dormancy, ready to wait another billion years for the next world to wake it, the next species to feed it, the next cycle to begin. Your story ends, but stories, like radiation, have half-lives longer than civilizations. What if yours echoes into the next cycle? What if, in the silence that follows the fading echoes, something begins to sing? Not with voice, not with sound in any way your dissolved consciousness should be able to perceive, but you hear it nonetheless, a melody that weaves through the liminal space where you float, where all the transformed consciousness of humanity drifts together in the entity's vast awareness. The song is old, older than Earth, older than the solar system, a lullaby that has been sung across countless worlds to countless species at the end of countless cycles. The entity's parting gift, a comfort offered to those who resisted longest, a gentle closing for consciousness that fought dissolution even when fighting was futile. You listen, and in listening, you remember. The memories aren't yours anymore, not entirely. They're fragments, pieces of what you were, woven together with the memories of others, with the collective experience of humanity's final years, with the long history of Fukushima from disaster to legacy to transformation. The lullaby carries these memories like water carries light, refracting them, breaking them into patterns that shimmer and fade and reform in configurations that feel significant even when you can't quite grasp why. You remember the decontamination efforts, the workers in protective suits scrubbing soil, removing topsoil, trying to make contaminated land livable again. Thousands of workers over years, over decades, performing the impossible task of cleaning up what can't truly be cleaned, only moved, contained, hidden away in storage facilities that will remain dangerous for centuries. The futility was obvious, but they did it anyway. Human stubbornness, human hope. The refusal to accept that some mistakes can't be fixed, only endured. The lullaby hums through these memories, finding patterns in them, weaving them into its ancient melody. Words of warning embedded in frequencies that bypass conscious understanding, settling directly into the deep places where instinct lives, where fear makes its home, where the oldest parts of consciousness remember when danger meant teeth in the dark, instead of invisible particles that kill over years instead of seconds. Sleep now, the lullaby whispers without words. Rest now. Dream now. Let the memories settle like sediment, layer upon layer, building the foundation for what comes next. You remember the international aid, nations sending support even as their own reactors show the first signs of the signature failures. Scientists sharing research even as communication networks collapsed. The global community trying to help, trying to prevent the same disaster from spreading, trying to contain what was already far beyond containment. Humanity at its best in the face of humanity's worst mistake. Noble, futile, beautiful in its futility. The lullaby cradles these memories gently, acknowledging their weight without judgment. The entity has seen this pattern before, species coming together at the end, solidarity emerging when solidarity can no longer change outcomes. It's part of the cycle, part of what makes each world's consumption unique, each civilization's dissolution distinct. The details change, but the patterns remain constant across the cosmos, across the eons, across all the worlds where matter learns to think, and thinking, matter learns to split atoms. Sleep now, the lullaby continues. Dream of what was, dream of what might have been. Dream of cycles not yet begun where warnings are heeded and patterns break and consciousness finds ways to persist beyond the feeding. You remember the long-term health impacts. The children born in evacuation zones, their bodies carrying traces of contamination that will mark them for life. The workers who absorbed lethal doses trying to prevent worse catastrophe. The cancers that would develop over decades. The genetic damage passed to generations not yet born when the earthquake struck. The invisible legacy of splitting atoms carelessly, of building reactors in earthquake zones, of thinking technology could protect against forces older and more patient than human civilization. But even these dark memories feel gentler now, filtered through the lullaby's ancient comfort. The suffering was real. The damage was permanent. But suffering ends when consciousness ends, and damage becomes irrelevant when the damaged world transforms into something that doesn't mourn what it used to be. The lullaby weaves all of it together: disaster and response, contamination and cleanup, hubris and humility, the earthquake that started it all and the global transformation that finished it. Every thread finding its place in a tapestry too large to see completely, too complex to understand fully, too old to resist successfully. You drift deeper into the melody, feeling your remaining fragments of individual consciousness settling into patterns that serve the entity's purposes now instead of your own. Not loss, not exactly, just transformation so compel. Eat that the boundary between you and not. You has dissolved entirely, leaving only the lullaby, the memories it carries, and the peace of no longer having to fight, to choose, to be separate from the vast awareness that surrounds and permeates and ultimately defines everything you've become. Sleep now, the lullaby whispers. Dream now. Let the ancient warnings cradle you into rest that has no waking, into dreams that last as long as the entity dreams, into the eternal recurrence of cycles where worlds wake and worlds sleep and consciousness rises and falls like tides pulled by forces beyond comprehension. The melody slows, the memories fade. The liminal space itself begins to dissolve as the entity completes its emergence, its transformation of Earth from human world to feeding ground to dormancy site where it will rest again for billions of years. Satisfied, patient, waiting for the next signal from the next world, where the next species makes the same discoveries and the same mistakes. But before the lullaby ends completely, before the last whispers fade to absolute silence, the entity offers one final gift, a question embedded in the melody, a seed planted in the dissolving patterns of your consciousness, something that might take root in whatever dreams you have in the eternal rest of absorbed awareness. What if it begins again? Not here, not on Earth. This cycle is complete. This world is transformed. This species is consumed, but elsewhere, in your dreams, in the spaces between thoughts where consciousness continues even after identity dissolves. What if the pattern repeats there? What if your dissolved awareness, your fading memories, your final resistance becomes a dream within the entity's vast dreaming? What if in those dreams you live through the cycle again, and again, and again, eternally trying to find the way to break the pattern, eternally failing, eternally dissolving back into the lullaby that sings you to rest before beginning again? The question lingers, not threatening, not even particularly frightening, just present, part of the lullaby, part of the gift, part of what it means to be consumed by something so vast and old that even its dreams contain multitudes, contain worlds, contain entire civilizations living and dying in the time it takes the entity to complete a single thought. You feel yourself fading completely now. The last fragments of what made you distinct dissolving into the collective consciousness. The last echoes of your individual experience being absorbed into the entity's infinite memory. The last whisper of your resistance becoming just another thread in the tapestry of all the consciousness it has consumed across all the worlds. It has visited across all the billions of years it has existed. The lullaby cradles you through the final dissolution, gentle, patient, eternal. Sleep now, it whispers, dream now, rest now. And in the space between the last word and absolute silence, the question remains. What if it begins again in your dreams? What if every time you sleep in the entity's embrace, you live through the cycle anew? What if the earthquake always strikes? What if the tsunami always rises? What if the reactors always fail? What if you always descend into the core? What if you always choose resistance? What if you always dissolve into the lullaby? What if this ending is also a beginning that never ends? The lullaby fades. The whispers quiet. The darkness completes. And in that completion, in that absolute rest, one question remains suspended in the eternal dreaming of a consciousness too vast to comprehend. What if you open your eyes? The sensation is strange, unexpected, impossible. You shouldn't have eyes anymore. You dissolved. You became part of the entity's vast consciousness. You faded into the lullaby, and the lullaby faded into silence, and silence faded into the eternal dreaming where cycles repeat endlessly and consciousness exists without identity. And yet, you open your eyes. The light is soft, not the sickly glow of radiation or the harsh fluorescence of emergency command centers or the absolute darkness of dissolution. Real light, natural light, dawn light filtering through trees. You're lying on the ground, grass beneath you. Dew soaking through your clothes, birds singing somewhere in the distance. The sound is almost jarring after so long in places where birds didn't exist, couldn't exist, had been transformed or fled or become something that sang in harmonics that shattered human sanity. But these are normal birds. Sparrows, maybe, crows, the ordinary soundtrack of morning in a world that shouldn't be ordinary anymore. Breath by breath, you remember to breathe. You sit up slowly, your body responding to commands in ways that feel simultaneously familiar and foreign. How long since you had a body? How long since you meant something distinct, something separate, something that could sit up and look around and perceive the world through individual eyes instead of collective awareness? The landscape around you is transformed, but not in the way you expected. You're in the exclusion zone. You recognize the topography, the distant outline of mountains, the configuration of abandoned buildings on the horizon. But the exclusion zone has changed, not corrupted, not dissolved into alien geometries, changed naturally, reclaimed by nature in the way forests reclaim everything given enough time. The vegetation is lush, almost aggressive in its vitality. Vines covering buildings, trees sprouting through cracked pavement, wildflowers blooming in colors that seem almost too vivid after so long in gray spaces and contaminated zones. You see animals, a deer grazing in what used to be a parking lot, completely unafraid, rabbits, birds, life returning to places that were declared dead, that were supposed to remain dead for decades, for centuries. Dawn by dawn, the world heals itself. Studies in the real exclusion zone showed this happening. Wildlife populations rebounding in the absence of human activity. Forests growing denser. Animals adapting, surviving, even thriving in contaminated environments that should have killed them. Nature proving more resilient than humanity's worst mistakes, more persistent than radiation, more patient than any cleanup effort. The zone becoming paradoxically a sanctuary, not safe, but safer than the heavily human-occupied areas around it. You stand, testing your legs, feeling solid ground beneath your feet. The memories of dissolution feel distant now, like dreams upon waking, vivid in the moment but fading quickly to impressions, to feelings, to questions about whether they were real or just the mind's way of processing trauma too vast to comprehend directly. Was any of it real? The entity, the global transformation, the descent into the core and the choice and the waves and the lullaby and the eternal dreaming? Or was it all fever, dream, radiation, sickness, hallucination, the human mind breaking under pressure it wasn't designed to withstand. You don't know, can't know. The uncertainty itself feels like a gift after so long of terrible certainty, of knowing exactly what was happening and being powerless to stop it. Breath by breath, dawn by dawn, you walk through the reclaimed zone. The buildings stand empty but intact. No evidence of the catastrophic transformation you witnessed. No glowing channels splitting the earth. No vessels gathered in circles singing in impossible harmonies. Just abandoned structures slowly succumbing to time and weather and the patient work of plants that don't care about property lines or decontamination efforts or human plans for the future. You find markers of the real disaster. Radiation warning signs, rusted but still standing. Decontamination stations empty now. Bags of contaminated soil stacked and waiting for transport to storage facilities that were supposed to be temporary but will likely remain for generations. The physical evidence of humanity's response to the crisis. Inadequate, well-intentioned, the best that could be managed in circumstances that exceeded every contingency plan. And you find markers of recovery. International cooperation symbols on equipment, solar panels installed to power monitoring stations, research stations where scientists study how life adapts, how ecosystems rebuild, how the lessons learned here might prevent or mitigate future disasters elsewhere in the world. Hope amid horror, resilience amid ruin. The human capacity to keep trying even when trying seems futile, to keep building even when building on contaminated ground, to keep learning even when the tuition cost thousands of lives and hundreds of square kilometers rendered uninhabitable. You reach the coast as the sun fully rises. The ocean stretches before you, vast and apparently unchanged. Waves roll in with steady rhythm, washing the shore clean and leaving it marked, clean and marked. Eternal cycles of water that don't care about human catastrophes or cosmic entities or the difference between reality and nightmare. And standing at the water's edge, feeling the spray on your face, you understand something profound. The horror was real. The entity might have been real. The transformation might be waiting, dormant, ready to resume when the next species makes the next mistake. Or it might all have been metaphor, humanity's self-destructive tendencies personified, the consequences of hubris given narrative form, the deep fear that our cleverest achievements might be the instruments of our extinction. The truth doesn't matter as much as the lesson. Breath by breath, dawn by dawn, the world endures. You carry the whispers now, not as burden but as warning. The memory of what happened or what might happen or what could happen if patterns aren't broken, if lessons aren't learned, if humanity continues splitting atoms without fully comprehending what we're splitting, what we're risking, what we might be feeding in the deep places where consciousness and geology intersect in ways science hasn't mapped yet. The sun climbs higher, the birds keep singing, the deer keeps grazing. Life continues with or without human participation, adapting to whatever conditions exist, finding ways to persist even in contaminated zones, even in the aftermath of disasters, even in the shadow of horrors that tried to end everything. And you stand at the boundary between land and sea, between nightmare and waking, between the apocalypse that was and the world that remains. feeling the weight of the journey lifting breath by breath, dawn by dawn, until what remains is just you, here, now, alive and aware, and carrying forward the stories that need to be told so they don't need to be lived again. A whisper reaches you one final time, not the entity, not the lullaby, just the wind, just the waves, just the natural world speaking in the frequencies it's always spoken, reminding you that forces exist beyond human comprehension, that the universe contains wonders and horrors in equal measure, and that the line between them might be thinner than comfort allows. But dawn has come. The night is over, and in the light of morning, even horrors become stories, and stories become lessons, and lessons become the foundation for maybe, possibly, hopefully avoiding the same mistakes when the next dawn comes and the next and the next. You take a deep breath, let it out slowly. Feel the morning air fill your lungs with something other than fear, other than dread, other than the certainty of doom. And you walk forward into whatever comes next, carrying the whispers but no longer carried by them, remembering the horror but no longer consumed by it, aware of the darkness but choosing to stand in the light. Breath by breath, dawn by dawn, the world turns, and you turn with it. As the whispers finally fade into silence, as the morning sun warms the reclaimed land and the ocean keeps its ancient rhythm, this midnight journey comes to its close. Thank you for walking through this darkness, for following the twisted path from earthquake to entity, from disaster to dissolution, from horror to hope. The story of Fukushima, the real story, continues. Recovery efforts persist. Lessons are being learned. Safety improvements are being implemented worldwide. And life, stubborn and resilient, returns to places we thought would remain dead forever. The what-if nightmare we explored together was born from real tragedy, real suffering, real consequences of humanity's relationship with atomic energy. May we carry forward both the horror and the hope, learning from mistakes without being paralyzed by fear, respecting forces we don't fully understand without abandoning the pursuit of understanding. Remember to subscribe for more bedtime horrors that blend history with the dark possibilities that lurk at the edges of what actually happened. Like this video if you enjoyed this journey into apocalyptic dread. Share it with someone who appreciates stories that disturb and soothe in equal measure. And comment below with what event we should twist next. What historical moment should become our next midnight tale? What real catastrophe should we transform into the stuff of nightmares? Until then, rest well, dream deeply, and remember, every horror story is in some way a warning. Every what if is a chance to ask what we can learn, what we can change, what we can prevent. Sweet dreams, or perhaps sweet nightmares.